Family, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Sankofa Video, Books, and Cafe. Founded by Shrikiana and Haile Gerima and named after the internationally acclaimed film Sankofa that they produced, Sankofa is a liberated territory that empowers thoughtful resistance against the forces that seek to oppress our bodies and minds through films, books, and programming generated by and about people of African descent. Haile Gerima, co-founder and owner of Sankofa, envisioned the On Our Minds series as a platform for our community to gather in solidarity with the intersecting liberation struggles of our people who are fighting around the world against parasitic capitalism and imperialistic neocolonialism. Baba Haile's vision was to create a space that centers artists by providing a platform to express and share emancipatory art created to amplify these liberation struggles. As we begin, I'd like you to take a look at the bottom of the screen. If you cannot see the bottom of the screen well and the rest of the screen to the left and the right of the middle, you may have a hard time reading the subtitles for some of the clips that we're going to play today. So keep that in mind. If you need to adjust, please do so now. The On Our Minds series has created an empowered space for us to come together regularly as a community to share art, music, scholarship, and conversation that construct solidarity and raise our collective consciousness as we seek to understand the interlocking global struggles and to navigate our own place and our own responsibilities within them. We began in July with Gaza on our mind, and we hosted Gaza on our mind every other Sunday for several months. Beginning in September, we extended our gaze to Sudan with Sudan on our mind, Haiti with Haiti on our mind, and Congo with Congo on our mind. After a brief hiatus, this is our second Congo on our mind, and I think it's our 14th installment in the On Our Mind series. Donations raised from this On Our Mind event will go to WPFW 89.3 FM Washington Jazz and Justice Radio, as they have since we began with Gaza on our mind in July. This decision was made in honor of WPFW's relentless advocacy on behalf of the human rights of people around the world. WPFW has been the loudest anti-imperial voice in Washington, D.C. for 48 years, and we honor that work here. I'm grateful that we have such an exceptional community of people here today, both as guests and as participants. If you're here today, thank you for being here. I was glad to see people getting to know each other as we warmed up into the event, and I encourage you to take time to continue to build community after the event is over. If you're watching online or watching the recording, thank you for being here. We are here for the long haul, and we look forward to seeing you again 2 weeks from today for Haiti on our mind, followed by Sudan on our mind, and Gaza on our mind. We're going to open this evening's Congo on our mind with what they call the speech that got Lumumba killed. Certainly, it was not his forceful words, but his forceful actions that put him in the crosshairs of the imperialists. But unlike most politicians that we're saddled with today, and like many of his peers who were also assassinated or deposed, the words he spoke genuinely matched his intentions and his follow-through. This speech was given during the ceremony where the Belgians were calling themselves granting Congo independence, which independence, of course, we know the Congolese people took. We'll follow that clip with a news broadcast of the global reaction to the assassination of Baba Lumumba, including the explosive protest on the floor at the United Nations that included Mama Maya Angelou, Baba Max Roach, Mama Abby Lincoln, and Baba Amiri Baraka, who is watching over us here in this room in these pictures here and behind the projector on the right. After that, we'll hear two more clips, both of Baba Malcolm X speaking about the Congolese reaction to the assassination of Prime Minister Lumumba, the role of the United States in that assassination, and the need to conjoin the struggle that Baba Lumumba was fighting with the struggle of the Black internal colony in the United States. He addresses first the understandings he developed from his trip to Africa and the Middle East in 1964. He speaks about elevating the individual struggle for so-called civil rights in the United States by connecting it with the global struggle for human rights. In Baba Malcolm's view, this internationalization of the struggle was the key to building power necessary to overturn the oppressive colonial structures that fall like a heavy blanket over all of us. In the clip we'll watch, he's speaking under a large photograph of Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. who he once called the most impressive black man to ever walk the African continent. This is Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba speaking on the occasion of Congolese independence, June 30th, 1960.
Juin 1960, le jour de l'indépendance. Le roi parle longuement des colons, de Léopold II. Il demande de penser à ces pionniers de l'émancipation africaine. Il demande surtout de ne rien changer, si on n'est pas sûr de faire mieux.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II, entreprise par lui avec un courage tenace et continuée avec persévérance par la Belgique. Elle marque une heure décisive dans les destinées, non seulement du Congo lui-même, mais je n'hésite pas à l'affirmer, de l'Afrique tout entière.
Le roi a parlé. Il a dit ce qu'il avait à dire. Puis, le président dit ce qu'il devait dire et remercie le roi. De l'autre côté de la tribune, quelqu'un fignole un discours non prévu au protocole. Il va dire ce qu'il ne faut pas dire.
Combattants de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. À vous tous, mes amis, qui avez lutté sans relâche à nos côtés, je vous demande de faire de ce 30 juillet 1960 une date illustre que vous garderez ineffaçablement gravée dans vos cœurs, une date dont vous enseignerez avec fierté la signification à vos enfants, pour que ceux-ci, à leur tour, fassent connaître à leurs fils et à leurs petits-fils l'histoire glorieuse de notre lutte pour la liberté.
Le premier signe que quelque chose clochait, c'est au fond l'écoute que j'ai faite vers midi du discours prononcé par le Premier ministre Lumumba à Kinshasa, que j'ai écouté. Et alors là, je me suis dit, là, il y a quelque chose qui n'est pas tout à fait dans le sens que l'on espérait.
Les images ont été perdues. La voix est restée.
Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres. Qui oubliera qu'à un noir, on disait tu, non certes comme à un ami, mais parce que les voix honorables étaient réservées aux seuls blancs.
Alors je crois que je peux même affirmer que le roi était d'assez mauvaise humeur après le discours et qu'il a voulu quitter immédiatement et rentrer en Belgique et que, bon, c'est se rendant à la raison d'État qu'il est resté et qu'il a assisté au repas qui était prévu et où Lumumba d'ailleurs a fait un discours beaucoup plus aimable à l'égard de la Belgique, mais je crois que le mal était fait.
Nous avons souffert dans notre corps, dans notre excès de l'oppression colonialiste. Nous le disons, tout cela est désormais fini.
Pour moi, c'est un super excité qui n'est pas capable de faire une échelle de valeur entre ce qui est important, ce qui est moins, qu'il n'est pas du tout.
Juliana Lumumba, fille de Patrice Lumumba.
Le contexte de l'époque faisait que quand on était vraiment un nationaliste et qui aimait son pays et que les mots d'ordre, bon, que tous les politiciens disaient indépendance, liberté, liberté économique, indépendance économique et tout ça, c'est qu'il y croyait vraiment. Et les gens se sont rendus compte que ce n'était pas uniquement des slogans électoraux ou bien pour avoir des voix, mais que c'était un homme, à partir d'un certain moment, on ne pouvait pas composer avec lui sur l'indépendance de son pays et sur certains principes qu'il a érigés. Et je pense que c'est pour cela qu'on a vu toute cette coalition, parce qu'il n'y avait pas que la presse, il y avait aussi l'Église, qui a été aussi très pugnace et très dure vis-à-vis de Patrice Lumumba aussi. Et même pour d'autres politiciens qui avaient aussi lancé les mêmes mots d'ordre, qui avaient dit aussi les mêmes choses, mais ils n'ont pas été attaqués de la même façon.
On vous lâche au volant d'un bolide roulant à 200 km à l'heure, en sachant que vous n'avez jamais conduit de votre vie. On vous dit, allez-y, c'est votre tour. Dur apprentissage.
This is Movie Tone, Jeffrey Sumner reporting. Arrest, ill treatment, imprisonment, death. Such was the fate of Patrice Lumumba. And it has been the signal for violent reactions in many parts of the world. First in the United Nations itself, where a Security Council meeting was violently interrupted. Fights continued in the lobbies and corridors. A series of struggles went on, and in the course of this would-be demonstration against the handling of the Congo situation, 18 United Nations guards were injured in making arrests. Now to reaction in Yugoslavia. This was the scene in Belgrade, where a crowd estimated at 150,000 people marched through the streets, a demonstration of disgust and anger. In Paris, the Federation of African Students demonstrated near the Belgian embassy. They said it was to show their concern over events in Africa and to express their mourning at the death of Lumumba. It wasn't long, however, before they were involved in clashes with the police, who aimed at keeping them on the move away from the embassy. A few of the demonstrators, disinclined to obey, were arrested. Finally, reaction in Cairo. Carrying Lumumba's picture, a large crowd marched to the Belgian embassy. Demonstrators climbed the railings and began their anti-Belgian protest by kicking down the embassy shield. In the BBC television set,
Congolese have been massacred. Congolese have been massacred by white people in the Congo for years and years and years. And if the shoe is now on the other foot, only thing I can say is it's like chickens that always come back home to roost.
Do you personally feel, though, that there's some shame or involvement here or some guilt associated with the killing of other human beings?
I think that the white people should be ashamed of the deplorable situation that has been existing in the Congo, which is not the fault of the Congolese, but which is the result of instigation by European powers who are fighting each other over the mineral wealth of the Congo. And now to make it appear that the Congolese themselves are criminals or brutes because they're reacting to these injustices that they've been victimized by is again ducking the question.
Chambi is the murderer of Lumumba, who was the rightful prime minister of the Congo. Chambi is the man whose forces fought against the United Nations forces and against the United States, and despite this criminal past of Chambi, now the United States is backing Chambi, who has hired South African mercenaries who are hired killers to disrupt the peaceful efforts of the freedom fighters from Stanleyville to make the type of country there that they want. And it is this American support of Chambi, actually, that's at the root of the whole problem.
Congolese
Well, for the past 10 years, the struggle in America has been confined to what has been projected to the public as a civil rights struggle. And in that context, it has remained a domestic problem. It has remained within the jurisdiction of the United States. And as such, it has been impossible for the Afro-Americans or American Negroes to try and enlist the support of other dark-skinned people who are being oppressed the world over in that struggle. And the difference now in the direction that the struggle is taking from the direction that the struggle has been going in the past, there are many of our people who are thinking more deeply and more broadly and are beginning to see the importance of lifting it out of the national context or out of the domestic context or beyond the jurisdiction of the United States government. And the only way this can be done is by internationalizing the problem and putting it at a level where it can be taken into the United Nations, and then all of the other independent nations on this earth can involve themselves in our struggle and support us. And the only way by which this can be done, instead of it being called civil rights in the future, we're going to have to label it a human rights struggle or the struggle for human rights. And as such, we can then take it into the United Nations through the avenues that have been set up by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. We can take our problem before the United Nations in the same manner that the problem of South Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Hungary, the Arab refugee problem, it becomes a world problem. And as a world problem, then the Afro-American or the so-called Negroes full results, because it's not left up to the one who's responsible for it anymore, but it's put at a level where the whole can see that our plight is wrong. It stood in our path in the past. It also makes a difference in the leadership. Those who have been posing as leaders of our people in America in the past, they can pose on this local stage where Uncle Sam is the master of the show and can prop them up and make them look good or make them look better than they actually are by giving them token gains and building them up an image. But when they step onto the international stage or the world stage, then Uncle Sam can't prop them up anymore. And their ability or lack of ability becomes exposed. And if they can lead us forward, they remain leaders. But if they can't, then they have to step aside and more qualified and bona fide leaders step up from the masses of our people, and then we get faster progress, we get more results. The Afro-American or American Negro intellectual perhaps permitted himself to be used in a way that wasn't really beneficial to the overall Afro-American struggle. But I think today these intellectuals have begun to undertake a new appraisal of the problem, looking at it as it actually is, and are beginning to see it more in the international context and the relation that it has with the African struggle. And the African intellectual is beginning to look at the problem in the African context and see that what might be good in one country, in order for it to be used in another country, has to be rearranged. You take African socialism. Many of the African intellectuals that have analyzed the approach of socialism are beginning to see where the African has to use a form of socialism that's that fits into the African context, whereas the form that is used in a European country might be good for that particular European country. It doesn't fit as well into the African context. So I think the African intellectual is making that contribution, and he's making it well. Well,
Abo, can you put that clip back up really quickly? The last one. So we just saw, we just saw Baba Lumumba's speech on the occasion of Congolese independence. We saw the international reaction to his assassination. We saw Baba Malcolm X speaking about Patrice Lumumba, who, I repeat, he once referred to as the greatest man on the African continent. And for those of us who revere Malcolm X, it's important for us to consider why he would have said that. What is it about Patrice Lumumba in particular that led somebody who we consider to be one of the greatest people to walk this continent to say that about Patrice Lumumba? The reason we wanted to pull that clip back up is I want to draw your attention quickly to one of the individuals in the clip. This gentleman right here, who you may have seen smoking the cigarette next to Baba Malcolm throughout the clip. His name is Carlos Moore. So the clip we saw earlier of the protests at the United Nations, where they actually were inside of the United Nations, this man, Carlos Moore, is the person who actually worked at the United Nations at that time, who opened the door and let them in. So it's all connected. Okay, so now we're going to bring to the stage Milton Alamadi to give us a breakdown on the history and context of the situation in Congo. Milton Alamadi is a Ugandan-American author, journalist, professor, and co-founder and editor of Black Star News. He is a scholar of note who has been speaking out eloquently on these issues for over a decade, and we're very, very grateful that he is here to share his deep expertise with us. Baba Milton.
How long take it? Greetings, sisters and brothers. First, let's give a round of applause to the Gerimas for having this space. So I hear that the money raised will be donated to this wonderful program at this wonderful station. But I hope I'm not going beyond my boundaries if I say that as you walk out, if you have some extra in your purse or wallet, I think the box around the corner, don't feel shy to stick some in that box, because we need to support these types of places. So let's give them another round of applause. I like sharing resources, right? Because I think all of us should be involved in the struggle. So there is an article that I recommend that we all read, because it will give you an understanding of why Africans are made to kill other Africans. The article is called Blood Minerals: What are the hidden costs of the EU-Rwanda minerals deal? It's in Al Jazeera, May the 2nd, 2024. And if you read that article, that implies that this is not really an African war, but Africans are being used to perpetuate a neo-colonial war. And I'm glad we saw these clips. Malcolm was brilliant in putting things in context. Before Malcolm traveled to Africa, the propaganda in the US media was that, oh, Africans don't care about you guys. You know, that's your struggle, that's your business. Malcolm said, I will go and come back and confirm to you that this is the same struggle we engaged in. And he went there, and as you who are familiar with the history understand, he went and he met with African leaders. he became very good friends with Mohammed Abdurrahman Babu, who was a socialist from Zanzibar, Tanzania. At one point became the Minister of Economic Development. Unfortunately had a falling out with President Nyerere and had to live outside the country. But him and Malcolm developed a very strong bond, and they taught each other. Babu taught Malcolm about Africa, and Malcolm taught Babu about conditions for sisters and brothers in this country. He met Milton Obote. He met Kwame Nkrumah. He met Gamal Abdel Nasser. He met Sekou Touré. He met Jomo Kenyatta. He met many African leaders. They welcomed him because they had heard him speak, and they knew that he would convey a very important message. And once he came back, and as you saw in the clips, he understood the importance of Patrice Lumumba. He understood why imperialism did not want or allow Congo to become independent. That was 1960, 1961. Today, 2025, we're dealing with the same issues. Yes, sir. Congo is extremely wealthy. And the Europeans and imperialism and their agents in Africa have turned this into a curse. When in fact, Congo, in fact, that was the original idea, for Congo to empower the entire continent. Kwame Nkrumah discussed it with Lumumba. They had a pact that many people are not familiar with. They signed a unity agreement between Ghana and Congo. And Kinshasa was supposed to be the capital of a United States of Africa. And one thing that people don't realize is one of the reasons, in addition to killing Patrice Lumumba, so that imperialism continued controlling the resources, was that he had also said something which is very important that is not highlighted enough. Lumumba said, once we secure our independence, we're going to return our resources in the interest of the liberation of the rest of Africa from white European rule. South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, all those countries, so-called Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, which was still ruled by Europeans. So when imperialism heard that and knew the resources that the Congo had, that was his death sentence. Beyond what he said in the clips that we heard. Once they realized that this was an African who was learning from Nkrumah and had declared that Congo's resources were going to be turned to the liberation struggle for the rest of the continent, the decision was made to eliminate him. And as we saw in the clips, we saw the US role as well. So let's talk about the current attack against the people of the Congo. How many of you have heard of M23? Somebody tell us, what is M23? In terms of your understanding of M23, what is your assessment or your evaluation of what M23 is?
M23 is the main rebel group that is right now operating in East Congo. M23 is the main rebel group operating in Congo right now. They are backed up by Rwanda, and they're the main ones responsible for all of the killing, all of the raping, and all of the atrocities happening right now.
Okay, one more. And any other person with a different?
Not necessarily different, but just I label them as a proxy army of Rwanda. So just generally, they are a Rwandan army.
So both of you are correct. There's not contradiction at all. So now, Rwanda is apparently the bad actor in this confrontation. Is that our understanding? Or would somebody want to add an additional evaluation? Is Rwanda, yes.
I wanted to add that for me, from my perspective, I think Rwanda Rwanda is being used to pin Africans against Africans to distract us from like what's truly going on. And for as long as we continue to focus on M23, then the problem is M23, and we'll never find a solution because the issue is not mainly with M23. First of all, if, as you know, with world order and UN and the US and everybody else involved, if truly M23 was the issue and the US, the European nations, and the United Nations was seeing what's going on, they have the power to stop it, but they're not stopping it. Why is that?
All right, thank you. All right, so I like to get all of us involved because in conversation we dispel some of the illusions, some of the phony narratives that are used. So during Leopold II's era, what was the agenda? What was his mission? What did he claim he was going to do in Africa for these poor African, quote unquote, savages? To make them civilized, right? That was his rationale for exterminating 10 million Africans, while stealing rubber and ivory. Yes, and today, what is the rationale? The rationale is to suppress rebels that are hiding in Eastern Congo and attacking Rwanda or attacking Uganda. The other rationale is to protect the rights and interests of Tutsi ethnic minority. Correct? That's what we hear. I want you to do a quick examination on your smartphones. Google what was Rwanda's main export in 1995. What is Rwanda's main exports, 1995? And it should, appear. Some of the economic indicators should pop up those figures or items. What was Rwanda's main exports? Did anybody call up any information already? Coffee and tea. What year was that? 1995. Rwanda's main current exports. Put that in. No, put that in. Let's see what you got. Has anybody pulled up any information? Rwanda's main current exports. If you put that on your URL, it should yield the information. Gold, what else? Tantalum. All minerals you can't even pronounce, right? All right, so why is Rwanda now exporting something it was not exporting in 1995? You have your answer. That is the answer. That explains the current ongoing conflict. And Rwanda does not consume any one of those minerals within Rwanda. It's all being exported overseas. And that's why I tell you from the beginning that this is not really an African conflict, but Africans are the actors on the stage. And that is what corporate media also likes to amplify. Oh, look at the Africans, back at it again, right? If they're not doing it in Congo, they're doing it in Sierra Leone. If they're not doing it in Sierra Leone, they're doing it in Liberia. It's always the Africans at each other's necks. Irrational conflicts, no explanation. Africans just wake up and feel today it's time to commit some massacres, right? Really, that's how it's portrayed in corporate media, correct? So you get this distorted narrative. And here's the irony, and this is the saddest part. They're killing fellow Africans for minerals that are not consumed in Africa. And it's not even supporting the economies of African countries. It supports the elite who are in control of getting it out of the ground and exporting it, and they get their cut. And if Rwanda is exporting almost $1 billion in stolen minerals from the Congo, how much do you think the beneficiaries in Europe are getting out of that? So this is a very profitable genocidal war. Leopold found it to be very profitable, but Leopold's regime was so homicidal that he was embarrassing fellow colonialists and imperialists. So they said, no, you're giving us a bad name, Leopold. And they took the Congo Free State away from him and made it an official Belgian colony. That was the solution. Oh no, let's not return sovereignty to the Congolese people. Our solution was to make it an official colony. And then in terms of the rest of the history, we saw clips of that. 1960, Lumumba wins elections. They didn't want him to become prime minister, but he won elections that they themselves organized. So he had to become prime minister because he was elected prime minister. But even then, they did not allow him to function as prime minister. He was overthrown after 3 months, September 1960. Instead, who did they put to replace this Pan-African who really wanted to use Congo's resources for Africans? Who did they install to replace him? Mobutu. So do you think it's an accident, as Walter Rodney referred to him as a buffoon? And Mobutu, he referred to Mobutu as a buffoon, Idi Amin as a buffoon. Is it an accident that people like that are the ones who are sustained in power? Mobutu essentially controlled Congo beginning in 1960 until 1997. People like Thomas Sankara. How many of you are familiar with Thomas Sankara? How many of you have seen Thomas Sankara, the upright man? Okay, quite a few have not. The good thing is available on YouTube. It's by Robin Sheffield. I strongly recommend it. You will have a very different impression of the potential that African leaders can produce. Sankara said a few things that are worth mentioning because it also applies to this manufactured conflict, I called it. He said Africans should consume what they produce and produce what they consume. How can you have your economy dictated on producing to satisfy the needs of outsiders? Think about that. Does that make sense? When you take care of your personal business, do you satisfy the needs of even a friend first or a relative before you satisfy your own needs? Think about that. So every African economy is distorted. All of them. Think about it. Africa imports $35 billion worth of food. Think about that from overseas. You still have starvation in African countries. How can a people who started growing food before some European countries existed now import food from Europe? You think about that contradiction. Remember last year, a few African leaders rushed to Russia and to Ukraine. They're trying to resolve the war. And you should ask yourself, wait, there are quite a few conflicts on the African continent. Why are they not rushing to resolve those? Let me tell you why they rushed to Russia and Ukraine. Because a lot of the grain they import come through Russia and Ukraine. So now that they're fighting, they can't give them the $35 billion that they should be spending in Africa in the first place. That's why they rushed to try to resolve that conflict. Think about that contradiction. $35 billion that could be spent on the African continent, right? Because you're busy growing cocoa. Who can eat cocoa? You sell it for cheap, they take it overseas, and then when you go to Whole Foods, you see chocolate made in Belgium, when Belgium does not produce cocoa. You're growing tea, you're growing cotton, you're growing tobacco while your people are starving. Does that make sense? That is why we need more leaders like Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara said, first of all, let's start by looking at your plate. If your food is imported, that is the evidence of imperialism. You cannot say you're independent. Within 3 years, Burkina Faso was self-sufficient in food. He said, how can we develop while we are not using the talent and energy of more than 50% of our population? Empowered the women. He said, we watch as the Sahel is creeping and eating up our country. We are not helpless. We can do something about it. They planted millions of trees. This is an African talking about the challenge of climate change. In 1983, when we have some European leaders still denying that there's a climate crisis in the world. This is the potential of African leadership. Then, of course, on the other side, we have people like Kagame. We have people like Museveni, willing to tolerate the extermination of millions of Africans so that resources can be plundered and shipped to Europe. And these are the kind of Africans they celebrate. Did you see Sankara being celebrated in any of the corporate Western media? Of course not. But Kagame, I mean, at least thanks to the power of social media, people can now disseminate information, so people are now reassessing him. I meet young people who tell me that, oh, brother, you know, I had a very different impression of Kagame, but I've been doing my own research. I've been interacting with Congolese and getting information, and now I know that he's playing a big negative role in this crisis. So I want all of us to be engaged in this process. We're not helpless. First of all, we are consumers. We consume these products that Africans pay for with their blood and their tears. So we are also participants. We can make choices to refuse to be participants as consumers. You can expose companies that are profiting from the blood of Africans. Friends of the Congo engage in doing very good research. friendsofthecongo.org. So I strongly recommend that you interact with them. Sometimes they welcome volunteers. They share very good information. On their website, they've listed some of the corporations that are benefiting from the blood minerals of the Congo. So now let me close, because we have a panel, I understand. So let me say a few final comments. I like that we are now seeing the change in the trend. And media coverage is also very critical. Media play a very big role in aiding and abetting these conflicts. And as individuals, as collective, as groups, we can also engage against this media, aiding and abetting. And let me give you one example. So the BBC had been covering this conflict for the last several weeks. And every time, the BBC headline was, M23 advance. M23 capture this town. M23 send, Congolese troops withdrawing. Meanwhile, the Secretary General of the United Nations is telling us, no, this is not M23. This is Rwanda's National Army. So why is the BBC, what authority does the BBC have to tell us one narrative while the UN Secretary General and even the US and other countries are saying, no, this is Rwanda? So obviously, the BBC is not ignorant. So when they present that narrative in that kind of headline, it is intentional. So I would tweet, and I would make sure that I would also include the Secretary General of the United Nations in the tweet. So I would say something like, so who is giving us the correct narrative here? Mr. Secretary General, is it you or is it the BBC? And I did that consistently, 4 days in a row. The 5th day, I noticed some difference in the headline of the BBC. You tweet and you make sure that you include others in the tweet, you share, make it difficult for them to ignore the tweet. And I'm saying, Mr. Secretary General, I want a response from you. Obviously, I'm not expecting to get a response from the Secretary General of the UN, but I know that because I make sure his spokesperson is also included. I know that somebody at the UN is possibly seeing it, and I know that the BBC is also possibly seeing it. I don't think it's a coincidence that after the 4th day, maybe the 5th day, they started changing their headline as well. I give this as an example of how us as individuals who are concerned or as a collective can intervene and help our sisters and brothers on the African continent. We should not allow imperialism to decimate our sisters and brothers. Children being raped, women being raped, so that somebody can profit and the share price of their companies elevated out of the blood of Africans. Thank you, sisters and brothers.
Thank you, sir. One more time, please, for Baba Milton Alamadi. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Okay, while we digest Baba Milton's presentation, we're going to have a performance from Atlas, a post-disciplinary artist and performer working through movement, sound, installation, and video. Atlas, you can come up now. And after Atlas, we're going to have our panel, which is going to be great. We have a lot of really great people coming to share with us this evening. So without, you ready, sir?
Yeah, it'll take me 2 seconds.
Okay, 2 seconds. Anybody, while we're waiting, anybody have any thoughts they want to share at this point? Any questions for Mr. Alamadi?
I don't have a question, but I did have a recommendation for a film that I watched recently that I think would be of value to everyone here. It's called The Soundtrack of a Coup d'etat. It's a really brilliant film, and it pieces together a lot of what you spoke on in the late 1950s and early 1960s, so highly recommend.
100% right. I saw it, I think it's at the Avalon. Yeah, that's where I saw it a few weeks ago. Yeah, it was nominated for an Oscar as well for documentary. It didn't win, but it deserved it. Yeah.
And we're actually going to have a critical discussion of that film coming up here at Sankofa. So yes, good. And we're going to talk about why we do need to watch the film, but we don't want to let it just wash over us. We want to look at it with a critical eye and be thoughtful about how they're telling that story. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. You ready?
scorched earth. Too many minerals mined. Drowning dollars and dimes. Loves and lines. Define. Define. Capital scorched earth, too many minerals mined, drowning in dollars and dimes, laws and lines, define, 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 define. Too much blood been shed, what is the future ahead? Alive, a dead, alive, a dead. The news flashes on the TV screen. Time is flowing, where are we going? Down the chocolate river, full speed ahead, 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 ahead. Too many, too much. Too many, too much. Racism, white, hetero, normal, patrio, killing anything queer. Out of fear, spreading fear like Nutella on white bread, white brie, black dead, Twitter thread, behead the lies. Capital scorched the earth, too many minerals mined, drowning in dollars and dimes. Too much blood's been shed. What is the future ahead? Alive, a dead, alive, a dead. The news flashes on the TV screen. The fake news, orange hues giving me the blue shit. The fake news, orange hues giving me the blue shit. The fake news got you confused, split down the middle like a part in head. Party lines instead of understanding we are one, cause as soon as that's understood, all in power will be undone. No more me, no I. We need more, we all, we gon' die. We all connected, it's all connected, it's all a web. Capital scorched the earth, too many minerals mined.
One more time for Atlas family. We have one more performance before we get into our panel, and actually is one of our panelists who, in addition to being a brilliant Congolese international development professional who organizes arts activism in support of the Congolese people's struggle, is also a spoken word poet. Give it up for Bertha Nibigira.
Thank you. Hello. Hi. Before I recite this piece, a little bit of story about me. So I am a diverse Congolese because I'm Congolese by birth, but my grandparents are originally from Burundi, and they went to Congo during in the early 70s or late 60s during the civil unrest in Burundi. So they were very young, gave birth to my parents were born and raised in Congo. So Congo is all they know. And then, they got married, fell in love, got married, had me and my brother. But Congo and all the conflicts about Congo has always been very personal to my family because during the first Congo War, my dad was almost killed because he was. They thought that he was somebody from a militia group, but he wasn't. This was while he was conducting business in Bukavu. And then during the second Congo War, my family fled. We were living in South Kivu, and my parents were separated during the war. And my mom ran away with me, my dad with my brother, and my mom was alone in her early 20s with the thousands of other women trying to get to Lake Tanganyika to board a boat to go to Tanzania. And there's a story that I'm often told over and over, and each time I hear this story, it sends shivers down my spine, that apparently when I was a toddler, Lake Tanganyika, waiting for the boat for us to be transported to Tanzania, I was just playing on the sand, and then out of nowhere, a militia group comes, and one of the members picks me up as a toddler and almost drove a spear through my small body. And thankfully, apparently there were some UN peacekeeping force around, and they came and rescued me from the hands of this militia group and handed me over to my mother. She was terrified. She was, traumatized. To this day, she tells me this story, and even when she's telling it, you can feel how, it still feels like it was yesterday. So, so to me, this war is not just another war. It's personal. My family lived through the first Congo War, the second Congo War, and now I guess this one, the third war. We still have family members, relatives in Congo. And it's what inspired me to actually go into the space of peace building. I am an international development practitioner specializing in peace building. And I went through there because, not because I wanted to bring peace, but because to process what has happened to us and to help me contextualize and just understand all of that. So more than anything, it's really why I went in there. And every day I'm just still learning. So this piece was inspired by the current developments of the conflict. And yeah. So it's an original piece by me, and I called it, because of this event, Congo on Our Mind. Democratic Republic of Congo, also known as the Congo. Congo on my mind. Congo on your mind, Congo on his mind, Congo on her mind, Congo on their mind, Congo on our minds, Congo in our hands, Congo on our desk, Congo on our laps, Congo in our kitchens, Congo in our entertainment centers, Congo in our cars, Congo all around, yet not in their hearts. heartless, egotistical pursuits, accumulating more than they can count, yet never satisfied hunger, minds spinning off track, screaming the more the merrier at any and all cost, insatiable greed, choking the people of Congo one at a time for over 3 decades. Technological advancement, murdering the children of Congo, sexually victimizing their mothers, their daughters, their grandmothers. You say peace? And the grandparents, parents, and youth of Congo say, what's that? What an alien concept. Something of the moon, something that belongs to far off lands. Yeah, peace, that thing that Westerners always speaks of. They brought us many things, you know, but somehow forgot to bring that one thing that they live by, die for, preach about. Oh, how convenient, right? But how can we expect them to share peace when sharing is not part of their vocabulary? Sharing responsibility? Huh? Taking accountability? You say what? Huh? No, it's better to pin the Africans against each other. After all, fighting and killing each other is our favorite sport of all time, isn't it? And they, well, they're just here happily facilitating, moderating, making it easier to take as much as they want at the lowest cost possible, you know, very cost efficient, you know. So why should they stop us? Why not continue to feed us and to feed us to each other and watch us devour each other? Meanwhile, they're silently plundering our homes, our lands, our resources. No, it was never a rescue mission for them. It was always about accumulating and the fear of losing it. So you still think this is just about M23? Nah. It's deeper than that, more complex than it appears. You still think they care about human rights violations? Nah, it was never about that and never will be. If it was, then why 25,000 women were raped in just 1 year? Why didn't that just pull their heartstrings? Tell me, where are those strings? Well, good luck finding them. First of all, it would help if the hearts even existed. If 30% of armed groups are filled with children, yet they turn away, tell me, what is their humanity? If 2.7 million displaced in North Kivu alone, over 7 million across the country, and they still pretend to care, tell me, what is their definition of concern? If thousands of girls remain out of school, future doctors, leaders, and teachers erased before they can even begin, but they still hold their peace talks. Tell me, what future do they see and talk about? So no, it was never about human rights and it will never be. So focus, 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 search. Look deeper. Dig beyond the surface. Think outside the box, ask unwarranted questions, open curtains, flip files, poke at what they feel, touch what they understand, speak their language, get out of the shallow and go and anchor deeper. There, you will find it. And the true path to Congo's peace will finally begin. That's right, begin. Because it hasn't started. And it is us to begin it and to finish it. Them, they could care less. We will find it. And sustainable solutions will come and the children of Congo will finally breathe the fresh air of its forest and bask in the equatorial sunshine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sister. One more time, please. Thanks, sister. And now it's time to take the stage. Let's rearrange these chairs briefly, and then we're going to bring up all of our panelists. If Baba Milton can come to the stage. So Nibigira, come to the stage as well. Where? Yes, sir. So we have been introduced to two of our panelists already. Our additional panelists, Sylvia Rabuye, who is an organizer with the legendary Friends of Congo, as well as with the Pansy Foundation and Focus Congo. Elvi Vanda, who is a digital activist with Future of Congo, and Jessica Kanya Nagambi, the founder of African Diaspora Connection. Ladies, please come to the stage. We're grateful to have a really thorough panel this evening who represent a lot of different perspectives and a lot of knowledge and experience. I'm looking forward to hearing our panelists tell us more about their organizations. Maybe we'll start there. So can our three remaining panelists just tell us a little bit about, just briefly, about yourself and your organizational work?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jessica Kanyangambi, founder of African Diaspora Connection. I'm also Congolese and international development practitioner as well. I've been managing, well, no longer, but USAID, USDA implementation in Africa. And so that, just seeing how, the neo-colonial dynamics of these programs, as I, very prescriptive in how Africans should be developing themselves. Meanwhile, we know the nefarious activities that they carry really opened my eyes. And so I decided to to create African Diaspora Connection, which is a platform that supports diaspora-led initiatives and engages individuals of African descent, as well as the global community, as development agents through connection, knowledge, and resource sharing. I found that, as much as we're trying in the diaspora, all of us have different initiatives, we're working in silos, right? And that is not helping us being as effective as possible to fight these neo-colonial powers. So I thought that creating this organization would help us do that. So right now we just launched a Congo Development Fund to have more sustainable donations going to actual development organizations through monthly donations. So I will be sharing that. I have a QR code if anybody's interested. It's less than a cup of coffee. It's like $10. So we're trying to really make it realistic as possible, especially since we all tend to spend, our money on, some frivolous things that cost less. Meanwhile, you can help, Congolese practitioners and development folks to really take back the power against imperialism. And just to add, imperialism and neocolonial, they love individualism. So, community building, which is, unfortunately, we don't have community anymore as much as we did back in the day. So we're really trying to foster that through this initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, so I international development practitioner, and what I've been now trying to do is incorporate the arts into international development, because I feel like I'm very young in my profession, and there are a lot of experts, people with PhDs and who've been in the field for 50 years who are very, very well knowledgeable. But then there comes me, but from the little years that I've been in this space, I'm realizing there's just people are so much in their heads and their hearts is missing. Like, you're creating and prescribing all these solutions and projects, but yet you don't understand what's going on in the hearts of people in which these projects are supposed to be taking place. So for me, with my artistic background now, I've said I'm going to find a way to incorporate my artistic side, in my artistic ability into the space of international development, because arts, it's understood, it's universal. Every culture, every people understand arts. So I do a lot of I curate a lot of events around the issues that matter to me in the space of international development and peace building. Just bring artists from all over the world, depending on the theme, to just discuss that and express express ourselves and just do our artistic activism. So I started a creative consulting firm that just helps organizations who want to partner with me or who do see the value in what I do to host and organize events and help bring youth or people of different topics and different mediums who use their skills to advocate for different things. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. And I want to say also a special thank you to all of the panelists that are here. It's not easy to talk about what we're going to be talking about and what we have been discussing, especially on a personal level, as we all can connect to it. So I hope that everyone is mindful of the emotional labor and re-traumatization that some folks may go through on this panel. So I'm LV Banda. I am what I like to call myself a digital advocate. I work with the Future of Congo, and the Future of Congo is a platform and a nonprofit organization that really wants to provide a sort of holistic advocacy for Congo. So not just focusing on a single narrative, but really getting people to understand various aspects of Congo. Because one thing about colonialism is that it removes humanization and complexity from people of the global south or people of the global majority. So we want folks to understand all aspects and facets of Congo. And another part of work that we do on the ground in terms of human relief and advocacy. So we have recently are in the process of constructing 6 classrooms in the formerly Mugunga camp, but now post M23's occupation of Goma, the Lac Vert neighborhood. And so we're constructing 6 classrooms there, and also not only focusing on individuals who are living in the displacement camps, but understanding that this level of invasion and occupation impacts the entire community. So there are folks living in the sort of outskirts of these communities that are impacted by the destabilization and chaos making as well. And so we're working on campaigns to support that. So thank you so much for being here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvia Rubuye. I am Congolese, born and raised in Congo. More specifically, I was born in Goma. I moved to Kinshasa, grew up in Kinshasa, but most of my family is from East Congo. And so obviously the topic of the Congo crisis has always been something very close to my heart, not only being Congolese in general, but knowing that this is something that, yes, affects my people, affects millions of individuals, but also affects my family. And so for me, activism and advocacy for Congo, it started because of my love for healthcare, access to healthcare. It's always something that I had a passion about, and I believe I had it because of growing up in Congo and witnessing how things are. Just in Kinshasa, the capital city, when you look at Congo overall, just in Kinshasa and seeing people struggle to access healthcare, I decided to be more educated on that and how everything happens. So the passion for healthcare was always there, but growing up as a woman and hearing about the rapings of others, hearing of young girls my age or younger than me being raped, having such a valuable, important side of themselves, their identity being stolen from them, is something that affected me emotionally, mentally, but also made me wonder, what is it that you can do as an individual? Because as we know, the topic of the Congo crisis is extremely complex, and there's so many players that come to it. But eventually, I went to university, and being away from your country and hearing from there what is happening, it made me connect to another level. I started doing more advocacy for Congo. I started by having a public health club, because public health is really what I love and inspired to do. And having it focus on that, there's so many organizations that support Congo, led by Congolese people that deserve support. A very important one is Focus Congo. And I held a fundraiser for them. We were able to raise a pretty good amount, about $600, and it's easy to look at the issue and look at, oh my gosh, what is $600 gonna do? But it's something that yourself can contribute. And I want to point out to what Jessica said not long ago, that contributions matter, even if it's $10. But right now I'm partnering with Friends of the Congo. I'm a youth ambassador for the Panzi Foundation, and I also collaborate with CCWM. It's a Congolese community of Washington Metropolitan, and it's all about advocacy, online advocacy. People underestimate the influence that you can have through your phone. And yeah, that's a quick rundown of me.
Greetings again, sisters and brothers. So, you heard me talk. So I'll only say make a few points. I teach at John Jay, African History, but I'm also doing my PhD in History at Howard University. So I just want to make maybe 3 other points. With the issue of the rape, and often people wonder why. Well, a Congolese doctor was interviewed, and he said rape is so humiliating, and people want to move away from the location where the rape happens. And the rape happens to be happening where the resources are located. So it's to drive people away so that they can then plunder the resources without any interference. That is one of the main purposes for the rape. It's not like a soldier is dressing up, getting his weapons, and says, I just feel like in a rape mood today. No, it's calculated with the objective to ethnically cleanse the location so that they can steal without any interference. So that's the purpose of the rape. The second point I wanted to make was that I also publish Black Star News. So it's blackstarnews.com. And I say this because I tell everybody the publication is not for my satisfaction. I want people to send narratives that they think would not be published elsewhere so that we can publish it, because my background is also in journalism. So when I first went to journalism school, and then I was a freelance reporter for the New York Times in New York City, and I would be sent to the so-called ethnic neighborhoods. And the focus was to have me just cover stories of crime and grime. And I would always pitch and say, there's a lot more that go on in these communities, right? But I never got to do those kind of stories. So I know the importance of controlled narratives. And that's why eventually I decided to launch my own publication, Black Star News. So any one of you that feel you have access to or know people that want to disseminate some information that they cannot share elsewhere, I invite you to take a look at Black Star News. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience to ask any questions that you may have. First, as you have led into, Congo is one of the places where women are the most intentionally targeted for violence. As such, it's also one of the places where women fight back and resist the most fervently and demonstrate the most resilience. Can you tell us about the resilience and resistance of Congolese women?
I'd love to start, and then I'll obviously leave it to the other panelists we have here. But thank you so much for this amazing question. It just brings back to the topic, of rape, and growing up always hearing it. I remember that I was introduced to the word rape before I could even understand what it meant for people to come together and be intimate in that way. I only knew it as something being taken away from women. And so it was just as an individual growing up around such an environment, it was extremely traumatizing. So when I try to imagine the girls that actually go through it, I can't even begin to process it. As a woman, when I hear rape, when I hear that a young girl, 6 years old, must go through such a thing, it is horrible. But at the same time, in Congo, it is something that has become common, and that is where the problem really lies. Because people get tired of hearing rape all the time, to the point that it's not something that is traumatic. When you hear, young girls are getting raped in East Congo. It is approximated that in a single hour, 48 women can get raped. And in those 48 women, it's young girls, it's old women, and they go through it. In spite of that, though, I can't think of Congolese women and think anything different than survivors, because we're not victims. We're in a crisis that targets us more than anybody else. We're in a crisis where it's not just about the guns, it's not just about the bombs, but it's about our own bodies being used as the battlefield, because they understand the power that a woman has. That's why they target the woman, because when you attack the woman, you attack a whole household. And these soldiers, they want to humiliate our population as much as they can. And so that's why they target the women. But we're survivors because we never let that bring us down. It's important to say the trauma that Congolese women are going through, the pain. But you cannot talk about that and fail to mention the strength that is there in spite of that. I have to mention the name of Maman Masika. She's a superhero. Can you imagine, as a woman, getting raped, having your husband get killed in front of you, having your 2 girls get raped in front of you, having to spend months in the hospital to recover from that? And aside from all of the physical pain, the mental trauma, you then go to create an organization, a system to support other women that have gone through exactly what you've gone through. In spite of the fact that you yourself, you've gotten no support, that your family rejected you from being raped, from having your husband killed, you're excluded from everybody else, and yet you find the strength within you to help other women, to create a whole community where women can come together and find strength in spite of that. That story is the best way to highlight who the Congolese women are, because we're not asking for people to fight for us. We're asking them to fight with us. And so I'll leave it for... Of course.
And I'll just add really quickly to the question of resistance and how resistance manifests for Congolese women. And I think we should think of resistance not as like a single act, but an everyday sort of occurrence and action and choice. And we see that happening in multiple levels in Congo. So when we talk about this idea of, violating women and raping women, it's also an attempt to stop active, ongoing resistance. So for the women who are living in the displacement camps, and there's a lack of safety in displacement camps as well. I think to set the scene for some people who you may have never seen a displacement camp, you don't know what it looks like. In some areas, you can think of it as just like an open field, right? And individuals set up makeshift sort of tents there. So there's no level of security to ensure that you'll be safe. From the place you were running from, you may have been raped there. It may still continue to happen to you when you're in the displacement camps as well. So while this is occurring and has been occurring to these women, they're the ones in their households who are going out to get firewood, right? To have that warmth and have something to cook. They're the ones who are going out to get the jerry cans and access water. So they're, as Sylvie mentioned, they're the individuals who are keeping life going in these displacement camps. So that in and of itself is an everyday occurrence and active resistance. And we can also look at for the survivors who then turn back and use whatever education, whatever means, whatever access they have to assist other survivors as well. And there was a Guardian article that it talks about change makers for Congolese women. And these were women who were going into communities and using their role as lawyers and helping to provide legal assistance as much as they could for women who had experienced sexual violence. So when we talk about resistance, I think oftentimes, maybe in the West, right, we think of it as these grand moments of revolution where there was this one singular act that someone did and it changed everything. But every day, Congolese people are resisting in just getting up, in continuing to care for themselves and care for their families and care for each other. That in and of itself is an act of resistance. And Congolese women do it every single day.
And for me, I'd like to add that even the resistance of Congolese women, even, to my own mother who left the country in the 1990s. But to her, when she's telling me this story, and I think it's very intentional. I never understood why. It really used to annoy me why she would continue to tell me these stories. I'm like, why do you keep doing that? Do you think I want to hear that I was almost killed as a child? And depending on the time, she would tell me like more with details that are so graphic. And she said, and I remember one time she was retelling this story, and she cried and she said, "Do you know there were kids your age who were getting raped as I was walking, crossing, and like we hear these babies, being raped in the far away in the forest. And you could have become that child. You could have become that, but you didn't." And it took me a long time but to realize, no, this is my mother resisting. This is her still saying, this story will not die with me. I know the places that you go, and this story needs to be heard. You need to tell this. And it's her way of empowering me, her way of resisting, her way of continuing the struggle by keeping that struggle alive in me. Because to me, I don't have any memories of any of this. But yet, from her retelling and finding, the right time too, because it's never just random. There's always like a moment I'm like, oh, I feel it. I think it's coming. The story is coming. So that is another story, another side of Congolese women resisting and fighting. And as Sylvia so well put it, we're not asking for people to fight for us. No, we're asking for you to support us, to fight with us.
Oh my goodness, that's a tough act to follow, ladies. So just to add to what our gentleman said here, it's not just about embarrassment, right? So I've lived through 2 Congo wars, and I've had aunts being raped in front of their family members. So many of us have suffered sexual violence as children. It is a deep-seated norm. Women and children are considered, it's a misogynistic society. We have to be honest about that. Women and children, obviously it's even worse in the East, but women and children, unfortunately, in a lot of Global South communities are considered second-class citizens, not as important as men, objects, essentially. There was a UN report that came out, the youngest child, baby, to get raped was 6 months old. So yeah, they do decide to put on, sorry, but it's a sickness, right? It's a sickness, it's a perception that you can do whatever you want to women and children. So yeah, they do decide it. And so I have just a summary of just what all the ladies have mentioned, in addition to just data on the resistance of Congolese women. As we all mentioned here, in the face of these overwhelming challenges, the resilience and activism of Congolese women persist. They persist in raising their voices, like your mother, Mama Justine and Sylvia and Elvie. They persist in organizing, as all the ladies have been doing, in resisting oppression and demanding justice. They persist in caring for their families, as Sylvie mentioned, educating their children and rebuilding their communities, despite violence, displacement, and systemic neglect they endure. Many women have joined the self-defense militia called the Wazalendo, taking up arms against the M23 groups or other rebel groups that are launching attacks in DRC. The women of South Kivu also mobilized very early on, just to give a historical context, during the conflict to denounce sexual violence and impunity and to fight for the recovery of victim rights, like Mama Justine has done. In Bukavu, the provincial capital, initiatives like Coalition Against Sexual Violence were formed following a consultative meeting between several local women's organizations. They put forward a proposal to the Congolese legislative authorities for reforming national criminal law to redefine and reinforce provisions against rape. And of course, these proposals went unheeded. Again, we have a misogynistic society, unfortunately. But as my sisters here, just to reiterate, have mentioned, Congolese women are not just survivors; they're leaders. Like these women are, they're change makers and they're warriors for peace. Every time.
Sorry. Sorry. From grassroots activists to frontline workers, they fight every day to heal our country and reclaim our dignity. But as the ladies, my sisters mentioned, resilience alone should not be the price they pay for survival. They should not have to bear this fight alone. The world must stand with them. Governments must take action. The media must amplify their voices. And each of us here today must commit to doing our part. We must not let suffering be ignored. We must demand an end to the violence. We must push for policies that protect and empower Congolese women. We must ensure that their stories are heard, their struggles are recognized, and their fight for justice are met with action and solidarity. And that just can be a share on Instagram. Y'all scrolling, we all scroll all day. We can just share, just a share. You don't know who it's gonna reach. The role of the diaspora and the global community as members of the diaspora, Congolese diaspora and global community, we cannot allow this silence to continue. We may be far from home, we may be far from these communities, but we are not powerless. There's more of us than these oligarchs. There's more of us, and I sorry, but I don't understand how we're not getting it. I know a lot of us are traumatized, and a lot of our family members are frozen, and we don't take action. That's why I'm so proud of you ladies, honestly, for us to take all this trauma that we have had to put it into action is not easy. And we breaking down all the time doing this work, but we know that we are the change. If we don't do anything, it's gonna keep going. And it doesn't mean, again, you need to be political. It's a simple share on social media, a simple monthly donation. Y'all spend more, not just y'all, but like people spend more money on coffee at Starbucks. I support it. It's so good. African owned, right? Ethiopian owned. But seriously, it's not this labor-intensive process. I know we're used to the soft life, okay? Soft life is supporting oligarchs and imperialism, and it's gonna continue. Look at the state of this country right now. I can't say much because I'm an immigrant. But, I mean, this is what they profit off of us just being passive and just scrolling, buying random things when we could also use some of that money to support global communities that are fighting this. It all comes down to money and resources. Look at Target, people that have boycotted all of these terrible stores that, revoke DEI, which really benefits white women. But I go on a tangent. It makes a difference. They lost billions of dollars. Money talks. Money talks. So this is just a call to action. Also calling your local representatives. Our tax-paying money is funding a lot of these wars. And demanding that your tax dollars, in this case, stop funding Rwanda, stop funding all of these wars going on is so important. You can just call your local representative or, send an email. Again, we have, LV did an amazing workshop where, and if you want to share more, just to help folks, show them how to contact their local representatives. It's so easy. At the end of the day, they care about votes. You got to find out what people care about. They care about votes. It's not a political act. It's just, hey, I don't want my tax money to fund wars. And guess what? They will be responsive. We've been meeting with Congress people. We have a Congo advocacy group. We had a meeting with Ilhan Omar. We had to brief her on the situation in Congo, and it was mostly white people at the table. I was the only Congolese there. We have to be at the seat of these tables. We don't need to be, spouting, revolutionary things, just being there. They have a Congo bill that just passed. We are just learning about it. If you're not at the seat at the table, you'll not know what's going on. People are just allowing oligarchs to make decisions for them in communities. Anyways, my last point is just please, the struggle of Congolese women is not just the Congolese issues, it's a human rights issues. Our phones, all of the minerals come from Congo, and we just need global attention for people who care, and it doesn't have to be a laborious process. Thank you.
Thank you, sisters, for your strength in sharing these stories and for your own resilience and resistance. Thank you. One more time, please, for our sisters. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Second question. Right now, Kagame and Rwanda and its role has become a really central topic of conversation. I'm not really sure how that started. Baba Milton mentioned social media. You also mentioned people approaching you and saying, I thought of Kagame this way, and now I think of him this way. I was one of those people who did approach you and have that conversation. That was a really shocking experience for me because, ironically, social media led me to believe for many years that Kagame was the guy on the continent, that he was just doing the best. He was the best leader, most effective, most Pan-African, strongest Black African leader that we had. And so it was really disorienting to come to very quickly find out that was not the case. And also ironic that social media is a double-edged sword in that way. It brought in that mischaracterization, and then it also brought in the recharacterization. I'm curious how you all, as Congolese people, people who work with Congolese people, how you came to understand the origins of what you were seeing. How did you learn when you were coming into comprehension of the world around you? Who were the villains in that story? How did you come to understand why what was happening was happening?
Sure. Thank you. Absolutely. All right, so thank you for that question. Well, in the case of Kagame, I have followed him for a very long time. So I knew the narrative that he was Africa's savior was, BS, essentially. But for younger people, that I can't blame them because he has a very good PR team as well. They pay a lot of money for PR to get positive coverage in Western media. Kagame does, Museveni does in Uganda. They retain public relations companies here in DC, in New York, in London. So that's how they create that narrative. And of course, since they're friendly to Western companies, they're allowed to do whatever they want domestically, right? And they still get positive coverage. So long as they allow access to resources to Western, and that's the hypocrisy, and that's the irony, right? Some countries get condemned for human rights abuse. Cuba is suffering under this unjust sanctions for decades. It's the same Cuba that constantly goes to rescue African countries, whether it's defeating South Africa in the Battle of Quito Cuanavale, whether it's going to intervene during the AIDS pandemic, the Ebola pandemic. It's a country that's always constantly, criticized and attacked for human rights abuse. Nothing said about Rwanda. Nothing said about Uganda, where tens of thousands of people have been killed or locked up or sent into exile. So I knew that narrative, obviously because I've been following it for a longer time. So then when I see these posting on social media, praising Kagame or praising Museveni, well, I know that's not the real story. So it's a bit easier for me, but I can see how younger people can digest that and get persuaded because sadly, the situation is so bad in so many African countries that when you see a capital city like Kigali, very clean, free Wi-Fi, everything looks, peaceful in the capital city, I can see how young people can relate to that narrative and get hooked on that narrative. So that's why it's also important that when you consume social media, look for many alternative sources. Sadly, we can't get enough of our young people to read more because you really need to do that. You can't get all your news. Or you can't form your perception of these serious things just by watching a 15-second clip. A 15-second clip with some good background music. We need to have a class on teaching young people how to consume information. That's what I can say. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. So growing up in Congo, I didn't always understand what was the connection with Rwanda. I I remember growing up being aware that Congo and Rwanda had very strong tensions, that there were always tensions between us, but didn't necessarily always know why. Eventually, in high school, we had an event because we wanted to share, my professor wanted to raise awareness on the Rwandan genocide, raise awareness on everything that happened. And so being in that class, I had to take part of it. And so I began to research more about Rwandan genocide, understand more. I remember going up to my parents and trying to get information from them on understanding the Rwandan genocide, but also the connection with Congo. That's how they shared to me the story of initially where my name comes from. My name is Sylvia Rubuye, but my middle name is Mutarushwa. And Mutarushwa means will not fall. And that name comes from my uncle that was actually murdered during the Rwandan genocide. And being Congolese, when my parents just told me that, I was very confused. I was like, we're Congolese. Why would Congolese people be murdered during the Rwandan genocide? What happened is that many Rwandan refugees from Congo many Rwandan refugees from Rwanda fled into Congo. They fled into East Congo. And so specifically, not to spend too much time on the Rwandan genocide, it's important to know that two main tribes are the Hutus and the Tutsis. We always say that the Hutus were killing the Tutsis, but it's important to understand how they were killing each other, essentially. But specifically in that times, the Tutsis were persecuted by the Hutus, and so they decided to run into Congo for safety. But Hutu soldiers followed the Tutsis within Congo. And during that time, they were killing anybody that's supporting the Tutsis, helping them hide, but also anyone that could look like them. And they were just had fair skin and tall. And if you look like them, you would get killed. And within that time, it's so critical because that's when a lot of violence came into Congo, came into East Congo. And during that time, so they were looking for Tutsis. They were killing anybody and everybody, essentially. And my dad had to flee. His whole story is crazy. He also nearly lost his life. But my uncle, who I get the name from, was not as lucky. As he was running away, because my family is from East Congo, Bukavu, also Bukavu Goma. When he was running away, he was encountered by the soldiers. And they didn't just kill him. They cut his body into pieces. So that's a very slow, very painful death for being Congolese, you know. They killed him just because, and that's a story of so many people. And so that's why, you know, Rwanda and Congo, there's so many ties. In that moment, so many Congolese were killed because of a violence, of a crisis that is not connected to us in any ways. And that is just how it's continuing now. And so that's how I started to understand, and looking more into it, M23 is a name that would always come up. The soldiers going into the cities. I mean, I have a lot of family in Beni, and Beni was a spot that you could not go to. I was never able to go into Beni and see my grandparents because of the soldiers, because of the M23. But who are the M23? It started because when the Hutus were following the Tutsis into Congo, into East Congo, you know, they found a way to convince the government to include Tutsis into the military, into the groups, because their claim was that they wanted to protect other Tutsis, and they began sharing the narrative that Congo was allowing for the killing of the Tutsis, although, once again, we had nothing to do with that. And so the M23, it has Tutsis in it. It has Tutsi soldiers within it. And the whole point was we need to protect the Tutsis. And it was supposed to be something in connection to the government, but eventually they decided to cut their ties, not work with the government, and just be a rebel group. The name M23 comes from an agreement that was from March 23 that they completely went against, and they just continued being rebel groups. And so this is a group that is supported by Rwanda, that has Rwandans in it, and it is the name that we always hear. And even when we say the M23 has done this and they has done that, we have to understand that it is connected to Rwanda. We have Rwandan soldiers within that, and we have Rwanda backing up those soldiers and giving up them all of the resources they need to be able to continue, the killing, the raping, and just humiliating our whole population.
I want to thank Baba Milton and Sylvie for giving that context, because I think it's really important right now as people are starting to learn more about Congo, and it feels as if this is coming out of nowhere, right? And I think the reframing of this question should be to the audience or to people who are now just learning about Congo. At what point did it become something that you started to see on your social media feed, or you started to see people talk about? Because for us as Congolese people, this is something we grew up hearing about. This is individual research we did because we knew that this was an issue. And so we pushed ourselves to educate ourselves more and start to look at the context. And I think right now we're in a globally where I won't say we're moving really towards decolonization or to a decolonial state, but there is a shift, right, where people are starting to question, what does it mean to resist? Who is in power? How are people being treated? What does the consequences and remnants of colonialism look like? And I think for a lot of people, just in the digital advocacy space and talking about Congo online and trying to push that conversation, it's a very low conversation. However, I have seen a lot of people saying, because of Free Palestine, or because of me looking more into what's happening in Gaza and talking about liberation and decolonialism, I started to learn about Congo, or I started to learn more about Haiti, or I started to learn more about Sudan. So I think it's really, really important to have an ideological conversation, because as much as Rwanda is a proxy for the West, for imperialism, M23 is a proxy for Rwanda in looting Congo. So if you're looking at it from an ideological perspective, right, there can be another M23. There can be another Rwanda. We have to be able to identify who is in power, who is creating proxies around the world for the purpose of furthering colonization, for the purpose of exploitation. So I think it's really important in the space that we're in having these conversations and being more critical about the state of geopolitics, like Baba Milton said, to read. Because we heard what our great leaders of the past said, right? The same things they're talking about then is happening now. We have an ideological and historical lens in which to look at this, and it's important to continue to do that. And I think someone in the audience was raising their hand. Sir, you? Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were.
Oh no, I like what you said about your perspective, like asking us what we think. And I was talking to Baba Milton earlier. I used to live in Rwanda in 2014. I wasn't very privy to everything, and I by staying there, I learned more. And I was telling him some things I wasn't really sure about, but you would hear chatter. I lived maybe 30 minutes outside of Kigali in Wamagana, and you would hear people talk about being opposed to Kigami or somebody in the community, and they just go. But I wouldn't see these things. People would talk about it, and then for me coming from here and going to Kigali, I'd be like, wow, this is it's almost eerie, because when you think about 2014 and 1994, it's not that long ago, and it was so nice. And I was like, how is this possible? And I'm Somali ethnically, and I said, but Somali's been dismantled for 20 years. We don't even have a functioning government. We may function out of Djibouti every now and then. And I was telling Baba Milton, maybe they'll pick somebody from Minnesota or Toronto to be president and do whatever, right? Because that's what happens. That's where they get these presidents from Somalia now. So I that was my, I guess, introduction. And then, nobody talked about when Kagame tricked Paul Rusesabagina to go back. And I was like, so but otherwise I wouldn't know that if I wasn't there, especially even in 2014 with social media and things like that. You wouldn't know. It was almost eerie. It's like, they had 5G like back then. And I'm like, oh, this is like a nice place, but almost eerie because people don't talk about things like that. But they'll kind of look at you like, oh, were you here? Like, you look kind of, so, but I appreciate you asking what was our thoughts, because otherwise I wouldn't know. And it's interesting to hear how you do get your information or you consume and how you kind of critically think about it.
Would one of you tackle the question, Jeff Kennedy? Would one of you tackle the question, why do you think the AAU or other African countries have not intervened in Congo and tried to mediate with Rwanda?
All right, so thank you for that question. I think part of the problem is that when somebody is paying for more than 60% of your budget comes from external sources, which are not from Africa, that presents a serious problem, And unfortunately, that's the case with the African Union. It is funded by outside entities to the extent, at the last that I looked it up, it was more than 60%. So it's very difficult for the African Union to have a purely African agenda. In the last election for the chairman of the Executive Commission of the African Union, it was widely expected that the candidate from Kenya, Raila Odinga, would win. He had gone through to a lot of African countries, and he was talking a lot about the need to eliminate these borders, the need to have an African infrastructure system so we can industrialize and develop. And then out of nowhere, the foreign minister of Djibouti ended up winning. And apparently it was because France was campaigning in the background and persuading many African countries not to support the candidate that seemed to be the clear front runner. And he had also made it clear that he would intervene very aggressively in ensuring that the conflict would stop, the invasion of the Congo would stop. And obviously, had he been elevated to that position, his word would carry a lot of weight. So that's just one example of how the African Union's hands are tied up. And then in terms of the countries that are supporting the Congo right now, South Africa is one of the leading countries, which has one of the most advanced militaries on the African continent in terms of manpower, weapons, and budget. And now you see what the United States is doing towards South Africa. This vicious, unwarranted attack, but we know why, they're attacking South Africa, because South Africa, intervened by taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. And, to be honest and fair, the pushback against South Africa did not start with the Trump administration. That's something that started under Joe Biden. They were talking about bringing legislation during Biden's administration to punish South Africa for daring to stand up for the rights of the Palestinians. So, it's very sad. I mean, the African Union was supposed to do better than what the Organization of African Unity did. And now when you look back, in retrospect, you wonder if they've actually done any better, than the Organization of African Unity, which of course, ultimately could not deliver on creating a United States of Africa, which actually would resolve a lot of the problems that we have. It would not be paradise immediately, But if you have Africans speaking with the same voice on issues of foreign affairs, on how to control our resources collectively, because if you have speak on the same voice, they cannot go to one African country and say, sell me the resources for this amount. And if you say no, I'm going to go to country B or country C. Well, if they're speaking with the same voice, you have no choice but to take it at the price that they demand. And that's just one example of the many things that could be accomplished. Even the conflict right now, even if they had a federated East Africa, right? That whole intensity of the superficial animosity between Hutu and Tutsi would dissipate because now they can relocate. Those two countries, Rwanda and Burundi, have one of the highest per capita density of population per square mile. Now they can move to other parts of that federated East Africa. And then it wouldn't be like, oh, you Tutsi, you are my enemy. You Hutu, you are my enemy. Because now they're part of a larger East African family. Thank you.
And I also just wanted to lift what Baba Milton said earlier in his opening speech in regards to your question as well when he quoted Thomas Sankara, right? So if what you said to look at your plate of food, and if everything that's on there is imported, right, then you're still colonized. So I think the answer to the question is that colonization has never ended. And when we look at attempts at intervention in Africa, especially when it comes to Congo, we look at the recent deal that happened with the Lobito corridor and how the president of Angola was supposed to come in and be this intermediary where he was going to have this peace accord now between President Tshisekedi of Congo and Paul Kagame. That fell through, right? Because African leaders lack power. They don't have the power to assert whatever it is that they want that's for the benefit of Africa. But then we've seen recently the King of Qatar. There was a recent meeting, I think end of last week, there was a recent meeting with the King of Qatar, Tshisekedi and Kagame. There was no word of it prior to it happening. There was no, will they come, won't they come? Kagame pulls out, Tshisekedi pulls out, okay, I'm coming again, because this is the games that they play when it's amongst Africans. It was just an announcement that came through, a joint announcement between the government of Qatar, Kagame, and Kinshasa, right? After the meeting, a press release drops. We have these official statements, and there is this agreement to remove the presence of M23 or Kagame's forces, Rwandan forces from Congo. So when we're asking these questions, it's again about framing. Does colonialism still exist? What are the barriers and the restraints that colonialism puts on nations and people of the global majority? And when we answer that question, I think it's easier for us to have a clear analysis of why these leaders are moving the way that they're moving, why one country is so amazing and so clean. It has a population of maybe 14 million. It has a history of, intra-community genocide and conflict. However, it's being purported as being a nation that's trying to defend itself. There's a lot of propaganda that's out there, as Baba Milton was saying, that Rwanda puts a lot of effort into propaganda. Visit Rwanda with the Arsenal teams. It's the cleanest, country in Africa. The stages, I forgot what even is the name of that stage, where a lot of African artists come there and they perform. And that may seem minuscule, right? It may seem unimportant, but Kagame is always on stage with them. So it's this constant sanitizing of the nation, this constant sanitizing of a leader who is actively committing genocide, who is actively reinforcing colonialism and exploitation with his neighbors, with his African neighbors, but he's sanitized. He's best friends with the owner of the NBA. You see him everywhere. So it sends a signal that this is someone that you can trust. This is someone that's okay. So then when you learn about conflict that's attached to him, you may think, oh, it must be the other side that's the issue.
For me, I look at it, I guess, with my peace building glasses. I mean, with all these, for me, just learning about the conflict, I always wondered, especially when it comes to Rwanda specifically. I mean, for me, I knew both sides. There were the people who were praising Rwanda and Kagame, and then those who weren't. And I've always wanted to understand what is it? What's going on? Why is there a group of people who are praising Kagame and another that's not? And from just, and of course for me, I have a lot of Rwandese friends, the Rwandese in my family. My brother's married to one, and I've lived with them, the ones who praise him, they're very vocal. It's rare that you will hear a Rwandese who does not praise Kagame. And for me, often just, I'm having social conversations with my friends, I'm like, why do you praise your president? What is it about him? And they tell you, why, the reasons. And, I do my research. I'm like, okay, what they're saying is making sense. Now the literacy rate in Rwanda statistically has improved. There are now, more people having access to education, having access, the youth in the parliament, like in Kagame, very strategic, bringing in the youth, as I've mentioned, the women and all of these things. So the youth for them, because remember the struggle in Africa for youth, it's the youngest continent. Majority of the population is under 25. And the biggest cry for all the youth is opportunities. They go to school. Africans, we have a lot of degrees. We're very good at that. We're very, very smart. But then we finish and we have all these degrees. There are no jobs. And Kagame, he's fixing that. He's engaging the youth. A youth comes to him with this is the project that I'm trying to do personally. You go to him, he gives you the resources. I've witnessed this. And last year, I went to one of Rwanda Day. And I got a lot of backlash for it because of some of the activities that I was doing. But for me, again, the peace building mindset, I want to understand. And there was there were two a twin. And these women, they were so amazing. They inspire me. They're youth, they're around my age, and they've done so many projects in Rwanda. And they started in the early, around 2013, one day. They went to their village, they saw an issue, and they're like, we want land to build a community and help our people. Somehow the word got to Kagame. Kagame said, of course. He gave them the money, he gave them the resources, and now these women, they praise Kagame. To this day, they're so vocal about all the great things that Kagame is doing. So to the youth, they look at that, and even for me, I'm like, you know what, if I was a Rwandese, and I was looking at that, and I'm looking at all my other African youth in other countries, I will praise my president too, right? But of course, it doesn't end there, because who are they, which kind of youth though are getting the access to the opportunities? Who are they? So for me, I am very skeptical about this, villainizing African leaders. For me, I'm always, yes, Kagame, the things that he's doing and all of this, but I'd like to, Kagame, for his population, for them, he's a good guy. He's giving them this, he's giving that. And then, of course, there are those who are ethnically Hutus. They have a different story to tell, right? Because they are the ones who are being oppressed because, you committed genocide. And the fact that even they say the genocide against Tutsi, that's very strategic. Because if you know history, you know that there are a lot of Hutus who were killed. There was a genocide also committed against the Hutus in the same country. So it's all about narrative, as I shared, a reframing of narrative. But even so, beyond that, we have to really be careful because, as they said, today's Kagame or it's M23, tomorrow is going to be another. So we have to really. For me, I'm always go deeper. Ask who's behind? What is going on? Why is he able to do all of this? And what does he want? So always go deeper and understand both sides. I think in order for us to find solutions, we have to understand both sides. And an issue for me that comes up in some of the classes, I remember I was in France in class, and one of the professors, this is a professor who helped negotiate the Arusha Accord. She an expert in African anything, and she said, Africans, you guys are so good at saying, we want solutions by Africans for Africa. But then when push comes to shove and they ask you, what is that solution? It doesn't exist. Like, there's no solution. Nobody can come to, as Africans cannot be mobilized and say, this is what we want. It's either, if there's like 5 of us here, I'm gonna have my own solution, she's gonna have her own solution, and we can never agree on anything. You see, and then if you're like an outsider, you're like, I can't even agree. Like, even if I was like maybe not a bad guy and I was really truly trying to work with you, who am I gonna work with? Who? So again, for me, I'm always, let's be critical of like how we approach these like conflicts, be critical of who is being villainized and when. As we heard, Kagame was always, praised, but now he's now a villain. But this is the same person though. So always question, why is this perception that we're being given, and just approach everything with that critical mindset.
I agree with all you ladies. I mean, again, as Baba Milton mentioned, and Elvie and Sylvie and Bertha, it's deep, really looking at the deep root, right? Again, all of this goes back, the Berlin Conference, right? The Rwandese, the Hutus and Tutsis, again, were unfortunately divided, right? It's divide and conquer. It's the strategy that colonizers have used for centuries, right? And so, which is unfortunately, we can see, its continued effects to today. And so for me, I just grew up learning Rwandese are bad. I've had, I even had a crush on this Rwandese guy, and my dad had a friend that was Rwandese, and I didn't understand, what is the reason? All we were taught was Rwandese are bad. And we also have to put into context, as Congolese, our education systems in Africa in general, very colonized. French, was our language that we were taught, that, the closest that you speak to the francophone, right? The Parisian accents, the more educated that you are. So human beings, a majority of us, are very easy to control. And again, we have to also put into, this is white supremacy, Europeans that have controlled, are only 7% of the global population are able to colonize and control 93% of us, who are the melanated majority. I'm just learning this now. And as Bertha mentioned, like trying to find what is the deep root? What are the causes of this? Like, why do we have all the information in the world, but why do we continue letting a minority group continue to control us? Because it starts, right? It's pervasive in our public institutions. And that's why I would love if people would just look at what's happening in the Sahel, even how they're noting it here, right? How, look, again, as Baba Milton said, question the narrative. How Washington is writing, it's a coup state. No, they're uniting. This is the playbook. Right? We have everything we need on our continent. We can process, even if you look at the trade policies, and I didn't learn this until my 30s, and looking at, working in international development, looking at structural adjustment policies, we were taught, oh my goodness, World Bank, working at the World Bank, USAID, that's the dream. Until you start looking deeper and you're in these systems, oh, wait a minute, why isn't this trade agreement, African countries can't process their own minerals? Because if you process it, you create jobs. And again, it's all about economics, right? That's the foundation. People are too worried about feeding their families, right, to worry about fighting anything. And colonizers have figured that out. Again, I just really wish we understood they're 7% of the global population. Can you imagine how the 93%, and that's what the coup d'etat, soundtrack to a coup d'etat is amazing, and I feel like it should be shown in every single university so that we can start understanding the matrix, really understanding how history repeats itself. So, and how we're able to be controlled. And again, just last note, again, look at what's happening in this country. Look at all these Trump supporters, a lot of them, he loves the uneducated. And we're able to be controlled because a lot of our institutions, we are not educated. A lot of our populations on the continent are not educated, right? So as Baba Milton said, it's important to read. It's important to question the narrative. Just like, you know, we were just taught, we weren't taught anything. I'm learning all of this in, you know, throughout my professional career. In my 30s, I'm opening up my eyes like, wait a minute. As Elvie mentioned, what these proxies, they keep changing, right? And Bertha mentioned, wait a minute, Kagame was a good guy. And then also they love to preach about Pan-Africanism. Museveni loves to preach about Pan-Africanism. Kagame loves to. So of course you're gonna, oh wow, this guy. And I was in Kigali when I was doing my international development work. And you step outside of Kigali, Gisenyi, it's a different story. It's a different story. People living in huts, people struggling, these beautiful babies on the street, young girls, you know, again, raped, having babies. It's a different story. So, and it's unfortunate. I know a lot of people, you know, love Kendrick, and, you know, as you mentioned, he loves to put on these concerts, inviting African-American artists, John Legend recently, right? Money, right? And so it's just, and controlling the narrative. So it's just, please, you know, as you're watching everything, question everything, because that's how they easily control us. Thank you.
Can I just add one point to what she said? In terms of the divide and rule, obviously at one point, Britain, tiny Britain, controlled 75% of the world. I'm reading this book now by Saul Platje, a South African who was renowned in the earlier part of the 20th century. And the book is called Native Life. And he documents when they were having the Natives Lands Act that dispossessed the Africans of the land in 1913. So in his book, he's writing about the debate that was going on in Parliament. And one of the European members of Parliament was saying, we have to be careful that we are debating this act. Of course, they ended up passing it into law. Because by dispossessing all the Africans, we're going to give them an issue where all of them can rally and unite. And this is verbatim. And so far, we've been very good in divide and rule. It's a European saying it in the South African Parliament. So it's a technique that they've perfected, they talk about openly all the time. So I just wanted to add that to what you said.
And actually also wanted to add something that for me, that I look at Kagame, I'm like, he's very good at that. Kagame, he's a great diplomat. He's a great diplomat, and as Suga said, they're very good at PR. And sometimes, honestly, I look at them like I admire, because if let's say the president of Congo, if majority of the youth in Congo could praise, fight you, if in random places where you know nobody cares about you have to say, but yet be willing, debate and have all these facts and points about why your president is the best. I don't know how many Congolese youth can say that about our current president, or Burundians, or you know, but him, and for me, like he understood the system that he's playing, right? Like he understands the system that he's playing, and that's why he's able to get all these to garner the attention and support of all these Westerners, because as we've shared, it's never about human rights. It's about the economy, right? Like he understands what they need, and he knows how to get it to them and deliver, and he knows what he wants. And also, even from my classes as an international development practitioner, you studying all these cases, agreements, and trades deals that African leaders have signed. You're like, did you read this? Why would you sign this? But then you look at some of the deals that Kagame is getting. Like, why can you not? This guy, he's honestly like, he's a genius at getting what he wants, period. And sometimes I'm always like, I wish other presidents would do the same for their countries. Like they have a goal for their people, and in whatever places that in this globalized era, You understand, you study the person, it's a business partner. I am doing business with you. You have something that I want, I have something that you want. So how can I get what I want? Let's negotiate. I think Kagame is very good at that, and I wish that other presidents, could do that. Like Africans, just in general, could do that.
I think we should caution at times when we refer to people who we know are acting in ways that are inhumane as geniuses, because we operate in a system that rewards the inhumane, right? So the only reason he's able to do that is because he's willing to do something that many are not willing to do. I think it would be easy for other nations as well to say, okay, let me perpetuate genocide against my neighbors. Like, let me act in the same ways that colonialism harms me to everyone else on the continent. So I don't think it's an act of genius, but it's a complicity in a historic violence that leads us as people of the global majority to be in positions that we are. So I would caution this idea that people like Paul Kagame are geniuses, because no one is willing to call Bibi Netanyahu a genius. No one will sit here and say that he's a genius for what he's doing and that he's a good businessman, that he's a good negotiator, he's a good diplomat. Nobody would call Hitler a good diplomat. Nobody would say Leopold was a great leader in how he was able to negotiate and have Congo as his own private, state and in bankroll. So I think although the outcomes of what he's doing is beneficial to him and those that he favors, being people who are part of his ethnic group, of course, that's great. It's great for them. But I think in having a moral compass and in doing liberation work and decolonial work is that we don't want to exist in a system that continues to promote, that continues to reward people that kill and commit genocide and lead the rest of us to think that that's the only way that we can move forward. That's the only way we can have peace. That's the only way we can exist in some semblance of equity, is if we're willing to play dirty, if we're willing to replicate what Europeans have done and what we're continuously complaining about. It becomes a sort of psychosis, and where it's like, on one hand, we want peace. On one hand, we want to be liberated. We want to live in this just world. But on the other hand, we praise people who do the very same violence that we're working against. So we just need to be, I hear that narrative a lot when we're talking about these specific leaders who are bad actors, even just random people like Bernie Madoff or some random scammer, and we're like, whoa, they were a maverick, they were a genius, how were they able? No, they're people who are in positions of power. So when you're in a position of power, you often get to do things based on a referral system, because you know somebody who knows somebody, and they just co-sign you, because we live in a world that does not reward justice or just actions. We live in a world that rewards privilege and power. So that's just all I wanted to add.
Thank you. It's like you actually took all of the thoughts from my head and said them out loud. We've heard a lot of narratives. I feel like the easiest way to understand who Paul Kagame is to understand the point of the dangers of a single story. That's where all of the separation comes in. It is true that even as a Congolese person, aware of everything happening, I know that people will look at him and say, he has done such great things for Rwanda. How can this country evolve from a genocide in that way? But in reality, Paul Kagame is a puppet. He's a puppet used, because when you understand exactly how everything happened, Rwanda was in an extremely vulnerable place after the genocide, after everything that happened. And so it's because of that, because of the proximity to Congo, specifically East Congo, and all of the resources, Rwanda was the best ally to have in order to be able to exploit Congo. And the thing is, Congo has all of these resources. Why not directly go through us? Because it is easier. It is cheaper to exploit, to manipulate, because unfortunately, it's not about the human lives, it's about the money, as what was said. If we want this crisis to end, we need the profit to stop. I cannot look at Paul Kagame and see a great leader, because it's an individual, it's a whole government that has blood on their hands. We need to understand how Rwanda in itself grew. It's a region that has violence within its history. You cannot talk about the history of Rwanda without talking about violence, without talking about the killings, without talking about the manipulation that could be so crazy, so intense, that you could turn people against one another. Hutus and Tutsis, they're Rwandans. We had neighbors kill each other. People from the same workplace kill each other because of an influence from a government. And it is an influence that continues. That's why whenever you have a video that's talking about what is happening in Congo, talking about the lives being lost, you will see so many Rwandan accounts just accusing it and saying, we love Kagame, we love Kagame. They're not addressing anything. I myself, I left a comment in regards to John Legend deciding to go to Rwanda in spite of everything that we're saying, in spite of this narrative that we're pushing that stop supporting Rwanda, because it is the #1 puppet used to destroy the lives of our people in Congo. And so just explaining how wrong it is and how wrong as such a big artist, you will still go. I couldn't tell you, every 10 minutes, I have someone reacting, oh, how can you say that? We don't care. Paul Kagame is so amazing. He's so great. He has done this and this. People are these individuals, they don't know what they're talking about and whatever. They're not saying anything connected to the lives. They're not saying anything connected to all of the trauma, all of the violence that is happening. And from a point of view, you know, it's hard to blame these individuals. It's hurtful. I feel pain when I see people like that. But I have to understand that it's the dangers of a single story. You decide to see Paul Kagame in that light, because and everything that you said about him is not a lie. You didn't say anything that wasn't true. He did this, he did that, he did that. But the dangers of that single story being shared about him is what is allowing for us to normalize that, okay, he's done this, he's made this possible. Because of him, Rwanda was able to grow in spite of the genocide and everything. But at what cost? At what cost did that happen? How many lives were lost so that all of this could be the truth? How many women have lost their lives, their dignity? How many lives were destroyed? Because it's not only the people impacted directly, it's everyone connected to it. Congolese people were suffering. It doesn't matter how physically close you are to it. And so when we look at this country, we look at our government, I just want everyone to bring back to your mind a single story. There's a single story being shared about Paul Kagame, about their government. And in spite of how dangerous it could be for me to even say out loud and admit it, I will never stop sharing the narrative that that government has blood on their hands. Everything that you see great about them, think about the lives that were lost because of that. And without the suffering of the Congo, Rwanda would not be what it is today. It would have never became what it is today. And that is something I don't want anyone to ever forget.
Yes. No. Don't apologize. I agree. Appreciate everything that you all are saying. I want to thank you all for your bravery and the fact that you, even though you're here in the United States, where you could just easily kind of melt in and just, you know, take in the spoils of America and forget about what's happening at home, and the fact that you all are so young, that you're here doing what you're doing, and so I just want to applaud you for that. When you all talk about the narrative, and you talk, and went back to me to Malcolm X, when he made the comparison between America. He's like my North Star, Malcolm X, I always say. And when he made the comparison between the Congo and America, all of what you were just saying, I just kept thinking about Malcolm in that sense. When you talk about the fact that what Kagame is doing, and again, I was also one who was a victim of the narrative. I know a few people who actually moved, Black Americans who moved to Rwanda years ago because of all of the propaganda.
I know some too.
And they love that. And when you talked about the fact that it was built on violence, again, I thought about that connection because the United States was built on violence. And when you talk about Kagame and basically just being a good diplomat, a good politician, I thought about and you get pushback whenever you say things about him that are true. it reminds me of the United States, of a man named Barack Obama, who had kill lists, who put Assata Shakur, who upped the ante on her bounty, who was a freedom fighter here in America.
Who destroyed Gaddafi.
He destroyed Gaddafi.
And Libya.
But he got swag and he can play basketball, and he married a black woman. And so I guess that's good enough for a lot of people. So you still see all of the connections. And it reminded me of the colonial mentality that Fela talked about as well. The education and so forth, the miseducation. So the same things are happening to us here in America as Africans born in America. But I did have a question about U.S. aid, because you mentioned that, you talked about that. I wanted you to talk more about that and international development, because there's a lot of people right here, as we all know, who are lamenting, who's supposed to be on the right side, who are lamenting. Not to say that what's the reasoning for it being dismantled is not necessarily for the right reason, but because of who is doing it, and because that person is looked at as the bad guy, as you said, Baba Milton, that people looked at Leopold, and he was basically just filling a role that would have been filled by somebody else. So I wanted you to kind of talk about USAID and the fact that people are upset about it here in America, not necessarily knowing the function of USAID and the like.
So before I hand it to her, I just want to address one issue that she mentioned, the one narrative. So Kagame is widely praised for having, quote unquote, stopped the Rwanda genocide. There's a documentary called Rwanda's Untold Story, and it's on Venmo. So if you go to Google URL, just put, how can I watch Rwanda's Untold Story? This documentary was made by the BBC, so it has some, you know,
Yeah, I saw it a while.
some creds behind it, right? This documentary has never shown in the United States for a reason. Because this documentary demystifies that Hollywood narrative. The documentary has Rwanda's former ambassador to the US under Kagame, Theogene Rudasingwa, and Rwanda's former military chief of staff of the armed forces, General Ramwasa, who is now in South Africa. And Kagame apparently tried to kill him 5 times. He survived. One time, you know, they actually shot him, and then when the supposed killer, intended killer, came to finish him off, the gun jammed, you know, like a movie script. The gun actually jammed, and that's why he couldn't finish him off. And he says the same thing, both of them, that it was Kagame who gave the order to shoot down the presidential plane that carried Juvenal Habyarimana, who was president of Rwanda at the time, April 6, 1994, and the president of neighboring Burundi, Ntayamire. And that, of course, sparked what became the genocide. Now, somebody would ask, what would be the rationale or the logic of doing something like that? In 1993, they signed the Arusha Peace Agreement, and it called for elections. But here's the problem. The election would have been conducted under one man, one vote. So given the ethnic demographics, who would have won those elections? So it would have been to Kagame, after fighting from 1990 to 1993, putting this government on the defensive, now to go and lose an election, which he knew he couldn't win, because the majority population would have supported the candidate of the incumbency. So this is the rationale, and it's explained in that documentary. The only path left for him to power was to create basically an inferno, and then step in and say, I'm the one who rescued the country, and then live on that reputation as the person who stopped the genocide. Very Machiavellian, but coming from the people I just named. So I highly recommend it, Rwanda's Untold Story. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba Mel. So yeah, just to begin, when you just look at the institution of USAID, right, it's an institution that is focused on prioritizing hegemonic interests, right? And so a lot of the people that are crying about it, right, are, and not to say that they're not well-intentioned, you know, people with good intentions, because, I mean, a lot of us, right, that enter this field, oh, this is a way to contribute to the development of Africa or whatever region you're from, because again, it's the narrative, it's what we've been taught, right? We don't question it. We have been brainwashed to think that, you know, these hegemonic powers are trying to, you know, develop our countries. And then you study it, and you're studying, okay, Marx, and you're studying, you know, and I can go through my grad school experience, and I just did a panel at GW as well, and just looking at the curriculum of international development, again, from a hegemonic interest, right, a perspective, right? And so there's even was a call to decolonize aid that started gaining traction. But it's just, it's so important, you know, when you're in these systems, and even looking at the award, it literally says to advance US interest. Every single award. And then I've been a part of several projects in Senegal, in Togo, in Rwanda, where these, you know, oh, the journey to self-reliance was like, was one of the frameworks, right? And then you have 3 iterations of the same project, nothing's changed, right? You come back, we had an agriculture project, you come back the second time around, you know, phase 2, it's still in the same position, right? It's to perpetuate dependency, right? It's a soft power, right? To show the world, oh, you know, we're here to, you know, contribute to the development. It's also, there was a report that came out as well, like in Nigeria, there was a USA project that was funding Boko Haram, right? Maybe I'm not, you know, articulating the right way, but it funds movements as well. There's been reports, right? And I remember in, speaking of, you know, Kagame and just puppets, I was, in 2018, I was managing a USAID DRC portfolio, democracy and governance, human rights, right? And that's when we saw, because I think Nanga just came out with an interview saying that the international community did not want Fayulu, who a lot of Congolese, you know that he won because he's a businessman, he's very educated. They didn't want him in power because he's too smart, right? Tshisekedi could be an easy puppet. He grew up in Belgium. And so I remember seeing, you know, reports of votes being, you know, in the water, in rivers thrown away. There was just so much manipulation and a lot of outside, what do they call it, election observers. Can you imagine in the US having an election where other countries are here observing your election? Like, what sense does that make? But when you're in this, these aid institutions, you just normalize it. And then things started, you know, kind of ringing in my head as we're having these conversations with these Africa directors who are mostly, you know, white males that are expert in Africa, right? It's always the white people that are experts in Africa, right? You try to give, wait a minute, this is not how things are. You know, you try to give feedback and you are silenced, right? And then this narrative of, oh, China, and China is a neocolonial power as well, but, you know, this narrative of they are the evil ones, right? And so you try to push back. I've tried to push back, and obviously, and you know, my contract did not get renewed, go figure. But you try to push back and you start really, it starts opening your eyes, right? So that's my experience with USAID. And I have a lot of friends that have lost their jobs, and I feel bad, but you know, unfortunately, when you're eating, right, you're comfortable, you don't, because they pay pretty well. And unfortunately, it was a very small minorities that are in those positions. It's usually a lot of, you know, white folks, again, that are Africa experts, Middle East experts, you know, the Maghreb experts. And so a lot of the reports that I've seen is a lot of them crying, right? USAID saves lives. And I'm so happy because of you know, social media that people are finally calling them out and telling the truth, and they're being exposed. So of course, the hegemonic powers have to, you know, re-strategize, right? Because all of this is coming out, and there is no stopping information nowadays. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit about my experience. Thank you.
And just to add on to that, I also mean somebody who was affected by what happened with the stop work orders and the with USAID, and yes, although to some extent, now lives are being affected because USAID is no longer able to go in and do the work that it was doing. But however, for me, I look at this and I'm saying it was high time for this whole, like the field of international development to be deconstructed anyways, because, through the many issues, you're studying, you're looking at this, it's just like so flawed. And also you have to understand, when was USAID constructed? And why was it constructed, right? Like the USAID, the whole field of international development came to be during the time that a lot of the world was going through decolonization. They could no longer legally colonize countries, so of course they had to be soft powers, right? They have to find other ways to invest, by helping, but at the end of the day, they're still pursuing their interest in all of that. So for me, although I do sympathize to everybody who's affected here in the U.S., but also even like my uncle being one of them who was a USAID contractor, now he's lost his job. But we have to look at the bigger picture, and like in the long term, I think even for us as Africans, it's an opportunity to look at this and say, okay, how can we contribute? Yes, as in the globalized era, we can no longer live in silos, like, what happens in one country affects another, but we need to, how can we contribute to once this is deconstructed, reconstructing it, how do we want it to look like, and what role do we have to play? We have a big role to play, because I think you've mentioned, there's more that actually comes out of Africa and then it actually goes through USAID. Those are facts, but of course that's not advertised, right? So we have an opportunity here to play a huge role in reconstructing, because it will get reconstructed, it will, but we now need to look at this and contribute. This is not the time for anybody who cares about Africa to be silent. This is the time for everybody to be using their power to advocate. And also, I would like to just applaud my fellow panelists for pushing back, what I said. For me, again, I'm a peace builder. If I am in a panel and there's people saying certain things, because I understand, the intricacy of these, the conflicts, they're so intricate, so complex, you literally have to understand, you have to understand both stories. You cannot find solution without understanding both stories. What are the other side saying and what are their grievances, right? So for me, if I'm in a panel like this, I like to play the devil's advocate and say, well, this is, this, and I just so much appreciate, pushing, because that's what needs to happen, honestly. Yes, I guess it might have been easier for me because, it's easier to push certain people, but we have to be able to push at every single level. Every single level, be able to push. It doesn't matter. It does not matter who it is. Even if, yes, we're both Congolese fighting for, if whatever narrative I am pushing does not benefit our people, push back, right? So I appreciate you for saying what you said, because it needed to be heard. But also, I shared what I shared, so you also understand what the other side is saying. Because if this is all you're going to hear about the conflict, then you're only hearing what the Congolese people are saying. You're not even understanding half. You have to understand what the other side is saying in order to contribute to finding sustainable solutions. So thank you, ladies, for pushing back, and please don't stop.
Sorry. In terms of figures, I have it here. So in the U.S., so the power of the diaspora, and that's why I'm saying just a little bit counts, right? Changing this development narrative and these foreign aid institutions is so powerful. So just in 2024, the U.S. allocated USAID $12.7 billion in foreign aid to Africa, right? While the diaspora remittances, and this is also contributions to startups, was $56 billion, okay? So There's $41 billion that continues to leave Africa every single year due to neocolonial policies, trade policies, corruption, and all of the things. So thank you for bringing that up. So it's so important to put into context. Also, remittances, there was 91 billion in 2021 from the African diaspora that went into agriculture. So we contribute way more to foreign aid, and they don't want us to know this. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, sir. Please, quickly.
First of all, I want to once again thank the Gerimas for opening up this tremendous space. Let's give them another round of applause. Yeah? I just wanted to say something very briefly in terms of so-called foreign aid. And I always ask people, if so-called foreign aid was supposed to develop any African country, why don't we see a single developed African country? So ask yourself that question. So that immediately reveals to you the true purpose of so-called foreign aid. It is meant to maintain dependency. In reality, it is Africa that is given foreign aid to the industrialized countries. When you sell your natural resources for a fraction of what the value is, what is that? It's not a check that says foreign aid, but that is foreign aid coming from the African continent to every one of those industrialized countries. That's one point. The second point, there's no better example to illustrate the purpose of foreign aid than when Kwame Nkrumah wrote his book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. If you haven't read it, please do, because Nkrumah outlines the challenges Africa face and will face and the solutions. Everything is there. On page 29, he's talking about food dependency. Think about that. In 1965 is when he wrote this book. We must be self-sufficient in food production. I just told you a few minutes ago that today Africa imports $35 billion. But here's the point I wanted to make about that book. When this book was published, the United States State Department wrote an official letter of protest to the government of Ghana because Nkrumah wrote that book, number one. Number two, canceled $25 million in so-called foreign aid to Ghana because of that book Nkrumah wrote. And that, of course, is the equivalent of about $250 million today. Here's the third point on so-called foreign aid. Nkrumah Ghana built the dam, the Volta River Project, to provide hydroelectric energy and industrialize. Part of the loan came from the World Bank. I was doing research on the State Department website, and I found a memo written to the White House saying, even though the World Bank has approved the loan, let's withhold the disbursement of the money. This is 1964. It's 65. If we withhold the disbursement of the money, it's going to make the Ghanaian economy ruined. And then the people and the military will uprise and overthrow Nkrumah. Nkrumah was overthrown a couple of months later in 1966. That is the purpose of so-called foreign aid. So I just wanted to say that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have one final question we're going to answer as briefly as we can. And in our answers, we also want to share where people can reach us. I hope people are inspired by the work that these folks are doing and want to join the work that they're doing. Yes, absolutely. So please let us know how we can do that and let us know where we can find you. If anybody has any more questions, of course, maybe they'll be generous enough to give you their time after we close, or you can reach out to them however they recommend you do so. Last question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank everyone for your presentations, your mind-moving presentations. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, definitely, big difference. The president of Rwanda, when he came here 3 years ago, he said he spent 25 or 20 years, I can't remember the exact amount of years, getting rid of eugenic-centric ideology in Rwanda. Can any of you speak to, is that actual what's happening within Rwanda or Congo now?
Could you give more out? As in
The president, yes, he said that he spent ethnic.
No, I understand, but I
Yeah.
mean, like, did he explain how he went about doing that? Like,
No, that's the part that he didn't explain how he. And
well,
I didn't get a
there's lot
chance
of
to talk
things
to him.
that
So
Paul Kagame doesn't know, as he's quoted to have said, I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know. So I'm not surprised that he is saying complete and utter BS and just it's for optics. But
Well, I mean, to that, I think what he's saying is that there's no such thing as Hutu, there's no such thing as Tutsi.
that's exactly what he was saying.
But if you look at the people who are in the hierarchy of the power structure, then he knows when somebody's a Tutsi, and he also knows when somebody's not. So for public relations purpose, of course, and that is something that is very powerful. People are familiar with the history of the genocide, right? Where an estimated 1 million people were killed, even though he doesn't like it when you start saying, well, who was actually the majority who were killed? And that is actually discussed in that documentary as well, because there are two American professors that had done a demographic study and said, well, if it's true that 1 million people were killed, then it cannot be true that the majority were Tutsi, because they saw the population that existed before the genocide and after and compared it. And Kagame banned them from returning to the country and called them genocide deniers. So, but I can see the power of him saying something like that from now on we just want people to be referred to as Rwandans. And that would be fine if everybody practiced it, right? But I don't think everybody practices. He certainly does not seem to practice it himself.
and I think you can even see in the way that, like Sylvie was talking before, right, giving historical context, that if you even appeared to look like Tutsi, you were being attacked. And we see that in a lot of the pro-Kagame, like Rwandans who attack us on social media, they're speaking very much from like tribal ethnic lines. They're not talking about necessarily, oh, like stop attacking Rwanda, we love Rwanda, Rwandans, blah, blah, blah. They're always speaking from this perspective of like recalling 1994 genocide. There's a attack specifically on Tutsis. Oh, you know, what about those Hutus that you all are hiding in DRC, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously that's a lie. He has not gotten rid of eugenics, or I think it's actually interesting for him to say that, because one of his playbook, right, his talking points on the international stage is to hype up this idea of African tribalism, and that the reason why all of this chaos making is happening in Eastern Congo is because, oh, they're continuing the genocides. Africans are so tribal. This is a tribal issue, an ethnic issue in DRC. It has nothing to do with Rwanda, blah, 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 blah. So it's interesting that this Pan-Africanist, this individual who, has gotten rid of eugenics talking points, uses that on the international stage as justification for why there are now, the updated numbers are reported 6,000 to 7,000 Rwandan troops in a sovereign nation to the west of him. So.
Oh wait, your contact. I forgot to give my. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Sorry about that. Yes, you can reach me via malimadi@gmail.com or milton.alimadi@bison.howard.edu. And if you forget that, just go to blackstarnews.com. My contact information is on the website, so that's probably the easiest way to get into it. Social media @alimadi. And that's for X. And on Instagram, it's just Milton Alimadi.
Can you spell Alimadi for the?
Yes, of course. Thank you. A-L-L-I-M as in Martin, A, D as in David, I. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give my contact information, and then I just wanted to say one point as we were having the discussion about, international aid, development, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. At the Future of Congo, we love to highlight self-empowerment and self-efficacy because solutions do exist on the African continent. Africans are acting, they are doing for themselves. However, when we get into these discussions, especially on the West, it becomes this whatever battle, and we forget the Africans who exist on the continent who are doing work for themselves. So we interviewed, So we interviewed an agricultural engineer in Kinshasa, DRC, and the work that he does with his nonprofit is, and if you go to my social media when I share later, you'll see the interview that we did. And so what he does with his nonprofit is that he tries to advance the work that local farmers are doing to increase the production that they make. Number one, on the first level, is to help them be able to support themselves and their communities. And then on a higher national level is to be able to produce enough so that, as we were talking about, the nation doesn't have to keep importing things that they can grow. Congo has enough I think arable land is what it's called, that it could feed all of Africa, right? It has enough, it has the potential, it has the education, people have the knowledge, but they don't have the tools. So he raises funds in order to get them better supplies like tractors, things like that they would use for farming, because a lot of the farming that's done with these local farmers, they're doing it by hand. And what they do by hand, what they're able to produce is just a small harvest that gets them from like day to day, right? So he wants to expand that capacity. So that's some of the work that we do to highlight solutions on the ground, to highlight what Africans are doing. And I want to, in the future, to be able to work with him in his campaign to bring that to you all, because I know a lot of, and maybe I don't want to be shady, but there are a lot of leftists in this space who are sometimes about theory and not often praxis. And so I think it's really important to make that intellectual but also like material connection to what's happening on the ground in the global south, what people are doing. So I would love to bring that campaign to you all, to communities everywhere, so that we can support these farmers, so that we can increase their productivity, so that they can feed themselves, feed their community, feed the nation. And so you can find the work that I do with the Future of Congo at the Future of Congo on all platforms. So that's TikTok, Instagram, X as well, and Facebook. If you're on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. No shade to the people on Facebook. You can find it there. And then for my personal account, it is at to the left 7. I had to change my account. So if you just go to the Future, at the Future of Congo, you'll find my most recent handle. So thank you again, everyone, for coming here, for engaging in this discussion, for your questions, for your thoughts and sharing. That's what we need, is dialogue to learn. And thank you so much to the panelists here. I learned so much from listening to you all and interacting with you all. This fills my heart with joy to see people talking about Congo in a critical and substantial way. So thank you.
Just to briefly touch on your question. So for me, when it comes to what this whole we're just Rwandans, and it's been so instilled in the young generation, Rwandese, that it's literally offensive if you ask them, so what ethnicity are you? It's an insult to ask a Rwandese that question. And of course, again, as a peace builder, if there's an elephant in the room, whether you ignore it or not, that elephant is there. It's not going anywhere. You can walk around there, you can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, it's still there. And I think a question that often comes up, even the people who, whenever Kagame was being praised economically, politically, it's always, okay, he's human. He's not immortal, he's gonna die. So what happens then? Because that's why we see oftentimes in with a lot of African countries, there's a leader, this leader has a power and they rule, but then something happens and they die, and then again, we're starting from all over, right? But if we're talking about sustainable peace, for me, that is a question that I always say, it's a matter of time, but of course, we hope the best, and because we can't afford to have everybody be at war, right? But if you continue to ignore an issue, it's a matter of time before it comes back. And it's so interesting that the neighboring country Burundi, the way they had same issue, had the same problem, war, also genocide. A lot of genocide was committed, but the way they decided to address the issue, like even at the parliamentary level, it's that certain percentage of each position has to be held from people of different ethnicities. And of course, Rwanda look at that and they judge it. But it's interesting how they're two countries, same history, same culture, same everything, but yet they've taken a different approach to a point where among Burundians, people don't care to say like, yeah, I'm Hutu or I'm Tutsi. Like to them, it's nothing. It means it's meaningless. To the young Burundians, it's like, well, my parents say I'm Tutsi, but I don't care about that. But I feel like for me, if you ignore something, you're adding value to it by ignoring it, because it's on the back of people's mind. The genocide happened and many things went wrong, but that's still there. People were traumatized. That trauma is still there. So that's a question for me that always, if I am among the Rwandese and we're having these conversations, for me, that's what I always bring and say that the elephant is still there. Oh, my social media. So you can reach me, Gmail, it's Bertha Nibigira, my first and last name at gmail.com. And Nibigira, it's spelled Nibigira. And then on Instagram and also LinkedIn is first name, last name. Instagram and TikTok is being a human being _ATCK. Thank you.
You're good. Thank you. To go back to the question once again, what to say that was not said before? Well, the narrative that he was able to destroy that separation, trying to look at it from the perspective of a Congolese, it's very difficult to accept that, to see that as truth, because yes, improvements must have been there, because there's been growth since that genocide. There's been proven effects of bringing back these people together. But when it comes to that segregation that happened, it was so strong within Rwanda that it came into Congo as well. Because I remember growing up, there was a moment when a lot of people would not talk about the pain happening in East Congo because they were connecting East Congo people, Eastern Congolese people to the Rwandans. And so that was a critical point in Congolese history, because it was so easy for them to use their own narratives and bring that into us to separate a nation, to separate our population. Because if you are able to find a way so that the people within Congo can disassociate themselves from what is happening within their own country, then your manipulation and your profits are at its peak, And so that segregation in Rwanda was so strong that even within Congo, certain people would step back, trying to be afraid of showing that, oh yes, I am from East Congo, Yes, I do speak Swahili, because you don't want to be connected to that. And that is a certain narrative, mindset that was not there before, the effects of the Rwandan genocide and everything happening there came with it, because it's during that time that there was that mixing, that so many refugees from Rwanda would go within Eastern Congo. And that's when that connection was made. Right now, though, as a Congolese person myself, someone that's from the East, my mom is specifically more from the sides of Goma, from my dad, it's more Bukavu. It's only now that I'm saying that the Congolese people were rising up more than ever. It's so easy to look at what is happening right now and not have faith, because governments give out statements and individuals just give statements of, yes, we're accusing Rwanda. And so it's easy as a Congolese person to feel like we're doing all of this, but where are we going? We don't need, how are these statements going to lead us to what we're actually asking for? But at the same time, I can look at things and see that it is rising. Things are changing. We have more individuals than ever within Kinshasa protesting for what is happening. I cannot stand here now and say that there is a separation within Congo of people from the East and people are not from the East. And that shows the evolution, that shows the development. from my viewpoint as a 20-year-old, I've never seen my country so united. We are so strong. We're standing together in spite of the narrative that were shared so that we could disassociate the pain happening in the East and allow for hatred and disassociation within our country. We took power over that. And we're together, we're fighting together, we're strong together, we're sharing the narratives, and we need other entities to join us, because this is not the Congo crisis. You know, we call it that, but who's benefited from our resources? Congo is so rich, but at the same time we're so poor, and we are so poor because of how rich we are. And this is a time for people to come together and be unified together. And so even though we have that government saying that, yes, that segregation is done or whatever, I don't think that government has done so much for that. I don't want to talk too much about them, because at the end of the day, the focus is us and what we're doing and the power that we're getting. And when it comes to contacting me, it's very simple. It's just S and my last name, Rubuye. I'm free to talk to anyone within this room if you want to connect more, if you want to talk more. I do work with Friends of the Congo. They're amazing, amazing organization here in DC. And it's very important to share it because it's called the Friends of the Congo. It's not an organization that, you know, just Congolese people have to join or just us, because we want to make the world realize that what is happening to us is not because of us, you know. I don't want to stand here and say that our government is innocent, but at the end of the day, overall, we have our own faults, but what is happening to us is not because of us. We are victims of this crisis. And so we need the people that benefit from it, you know, to highlight that, to share the stories. And so yes, Future of the Congo also is amazing. I grew up seeing that and learning that it's youth-led. Another one that I'm part of is the Pansy Foundation. It's an amazing foundation focused on the women, because as we said, women are targeted a lot in this crisis, and it was started by my North Pole, you know, a star, Dr. Denis Mukwege, a gynecologist supporting women. And so they have headquarters here in Washington, D.C. Follow Pansy Foundation. They have a hospital, and they're doing amazing work, you know, for the women that are suffering. It's March, it's International Women's Month. So just have Pansy at the back of your mind and the work that they're doing, and think of all the women that that deserve the spotlight and the support.
And Pansy Foundation is
the Pansy,
Panzi.
Thank you, yeah, Panzi.
Oh, I'm gonna come around with our barcode really quickly, because you know we need to strategize and community building and facilitating the process, because we shared a lot of information and it's hard, and that's part of our platform at African Diaspora Connection. We are trying to mobilize all these amazing efforts so that everybody can just find us, find all of these amazing initiatives. And again, you know, supporting Congo development initiatives for less than a cup of coffee a day. So I'm gonna come around, and again, I know a lot of us think that these, you know, conflicts are far away, they're not gonna affect us, but look at what's happening now. This is the same forces slaughtering us for centuries. Eventually, the chicken comes to roost, right? As our great Malcolm, did I say it right? Did he say the chicken come home to roost? And they're coming to roost. So, you know, being passive is, you can't afford to be passive anymore. Try to get a little engaged. We all have some kind of trauma. We're dealing with it, but the best course of action against oligarchs, imperialists, is to understand what's going on, do your research. So I'm gonna come around. We just started this Congo Development Fund. We're gonna be adding, again, these amazing organizations. We're gonna, every time we have folks, because I know our attention span is real quick and we leave and you know, we got things going on in our lives. So we're trying to facilitate the process as much as possible. We are the mobilizers and trying to really get all of us on one spot. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you to all of our brilliant, amazing panelists. Thank you all so much. I know a lot of us could stay here all night, but we do have to come to a close. The recording of this event will be available on Sankofa's YouTube page. I know I'm gonna have to go back because the amount of information we just got was like a fire hose, and you cannot keep up. So I encourage people to go back and review that recording if you're really interested, and we all should be. I want to give a shout out to Friends of Congo. Without Friends of Congo, we could not have organized this incredible panel. So thank you to Friends of Congo and Maurice Carney for the earth-shattering work that they do constantly for over a decade, like 15 years, a long time they've been doing this work. So thank you to Maurice. 2 weeks from now, Haiti on our mind. Then we have Sudan and Gaza. It's important that we understand the connections between these different struggles. And so I encourage everyone here to come and also pollinate those environments, especially our panelists. The more we understand each other's struggles, the more we understand our own struggles. And it really is all one struggle. We're going to have, as I mentioned earlier, a critical viewing or critical discussion of Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Again, we encourage you, watch the film, important film, but watch it with a critical lens and be thoughtful about how they're presenting the stories of these people who they're profiling in this film. We're going to have in May, we heard a lot about Baba Malcolm today, and Baba Malcolm, of course, his brilliance runs through so much of what we're still trying to digest today. We're still trying to really understand him. And his 100th birthday is this year, May 19th. And so we're gonna be having here at Sankofa a series of events in May honoring Baba Malcolm and his legacy. So please sign up for our newsletter if you're not already on it. You can do that at sankofa.com. You can also do that in the front, so you can get information about that and all the other events that we're having. And finally, all donations, if you want to make any donations, WPFW.org, click the big red Donate Now button. Thank you to WPFW, another WPFW programmer here, Kabab. This program is amazing. African Deep Thought on Mondays at 3 p.m. Amazing, amazing show. And thank you all for being here. Thank you. Peace.
Excuse me, folks. I want to say something because I don't want to go face my wife and tell and gossip on you guys. I want to say a few things. One is how impressive it is, not the old man, but you young people, how impressive you are at this. Seriously, it's a genuinely. To me, you are the fruits of our disaster. Africa is a disaster, and we cannot cover that up. And so for me, to see you folks makes me feel like everything we tried here is worth it. And we just hope that the critical mind should never be put in neutral mode. Otherwise, we lose the game. So as I sat here and listening to you, two things I want to bring. One is really that our reason for this place is to enable young people to be history makers, not spectators. I have taught for 40-something years at Howard University. It's something I learned. My job, initially I thought, my wife and me, we thought we were revolutionaries. And then we realized that revolutionaries don't come out of thin air. And sometimes a certain generation has to accept you are a fertilizer. And I accept myself as being a fertilizer. But the fertilizer is for that whole Fanonian idea of history makers. The non-spectators will come. We don't know when. We can't be desperate to bring them about before the time is ripe. They will come. But we have to say we left something for them. And I think that's what we do in film here. Every film we make, we're leaving it not necessarily knowing what generation, but it's going, because Africa cannot afford but be a continent of revolution because of its historical circumstances. It has to be a revolutionary continent. And I think that in the time of the American Empire, the American Empire has created middle-class black people. And middle-class black people are always the mortgaged section of our society, which we are. We live to pay tuition fee that we took loan to study. Most of what we studied is very dependent-oriented. We buy houses, we get mortgaged more. And the American Empire created middle class. Middle class don't make revolution. They are mortgaged by the capitalist arrangement. And so we pay bills all the time. And our kids went to school, they're paying bills, mortgaged again. And so that cycle is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there will be Africans because our history would not allow not to bring a generation that would make revolution. We were talking about Kigami a lot. And I think what we forgot there, in my view, is that we are the enablers of the Kigamis, the Obamas. In this place, when first Obama came, my wife and me always don't trust nobody, no politician, because our history does not allow us to trust even a black politicians we don't trust. And therefore we did a whole installment for 5 installments we called Who is Obama to Us? I think that's what you have to always ask as young people. Anything that comes when you get we're so hungry, black people just galvanize around something almost to kill somebody defending something they regret 5 years later. And so out of that experience, for me, Kigami is enabled by those of us, especially who have taken black nationalism as an end. Right. And I think Fanon, Du Bois, all those people try to tell us, Angela Davis, try to tell us that black nationalism, is to a point to bring you to the revolutionary responsibility. So for me, Kigami knows one thing about black people. He knows how to cut down BBC, tells white people to go off, but it's all game. The very people who give him, empower him, he tells them to go to hell, and we get quenched, we get happy. Because every time we see disingenuous people knock down the imperialist we all feel is the bad guy, we become their slaves. And this is, Kigami has known it so good. We know this guy. We've been at Howard here. We know who he is. But black people, what they see is his fake black nationalism. He appeases us by saying, people would come to me from Howard. He told of this BBC woman. He told her off. But what we don't know is it's a game that he's allowed to do by the power that put him in place to play the game he's playing. The other part I'm interested is really we have to begin to question not the power. All these books we have, they've spoken about white people and white power and white supremacy. What we are now need, I think, in the 21st and 2nd century is go through more the Fanonian analysis of our own brains. What makes us so disposable to manipulation? Because everybody was saying, we made this, they made us do this, she made me do this, the devil made me this. And this is a very white drama. White people in Hollywood created the bad, the good guy, and we are just become ping pong watchers. The only thing exercising in black life is our neck, looking at who's on our side. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we have to figure out why is it that we are predisposed to manipulation. To me, all the crisis in Congo, it encapsulated, but it's all Africa. The ethnic issue you guys were talking about, I gave 5 years at a workshop in Luxor, Egypt. My best students came from Rwanda. My worst students came from Nigeria. It's a fact. Even at Howard, Nigerian students are the most hardest thing to really make them realize their historical possibility with the kind of rich country they live in. But the Rwandese I saw, they were very critical about the society Kagame was forming. These are Rwandese. Okay, so the ethnic thing does not fly well with the the artists who are from Rwanda. They're saying, my mother is Tutsi, my father was Hutsi. The splitting hair and the fact there's false exorcism that took place in Rwanda, controlled therapy, all this is not flying well in Rwanda. So we have to make sure that we don't create anti-Rwandese sentiment. The Rwandi people are like us, like all of us. They are at the mercy of the power structure that is landing on them. And so to make sure that we don't go into ethnic game, we have to stop the minute we see ethnic, they did this to us, we're forgetting the power structure that we claim we understand, imperialism, etc. And the other part of it is, what happens if America goes down? Do we all go down? Africa goes down? I mean, I don't get it. China is rising. America is going to go down. Of course. The American empire is over. It has created a middle class in Africa. We're going to go down with it. But I'll tell you one thing. The young history makers in Africa will come after even what we build, we middle class people. My wife and me always says, this bookstore, if black people rise up, and white people rise up in America to change, we're not going to stand with a gun outside our building saying, oh, this is a black business, don't attack us, don't burn us. We're going to go, we know we go down with it, because that's what revolution means. So to me, make sure that we don't create institutions, grotesque institutions that we have to defend. And so our idea should be, revolutionaries will rise up in Africa. They don't have our logics. They were not miseducated like me. They don't understand this vocabulary of imperialism. They are completely a tornado that no one would understand how they think. And that is the Africans that is going to come. We better be prepared. So for me, we don't create the future if we don't understand we are fertilizers of the future. The future will have their own language. We don't give them language. They know what to fight. That's all I really want to really bring to you guys, to you young people. I really admired. I want you to know critical thinking means not to embrace immediately. Even a lover, you don't go down the first second you meet that person. Then no. You're going to live regretting it. And even in this soundtrack to Coup d'etat, be careful what that film is about. Yeah. Be careful. You know, we've lived this period. We know, and the way jazz is used there, I'm very concerned about that film. I know filmmakers, friends of mine, who try to get the Belgium footage this white boy got. How did he get it? They told us it disappeared. Lumumba's image disappeared when we try to make a movie, and then suddenly it's out for a white boy. What is going on? So I would say, come, let's read that film critically. Let's see what it is saying about jazz, what it is saying about African Americans. We need to critically look at that film. And so I would say, you young folks, let me tell you something. You're impressive, you're brilliant, but make sure you don't stop learning. You don't stop learning. Because to me, you are like crawling now. And it's the impressive part of it. I felt so good because we were having a problem to get Congo dealt with. You know, Congo in our mind, it took us days to find people like you. Okay? Because it's really, it's the most neglected issue.
Yes,
you know? And for you folks to come and contribute so good, I thank you. Hopefully with, I represented my wife. Sometimes she claims I didn't. But I would say thank you, young people. You made a day for me. You made an evening for me. even if I didn't agree of certain things if you said, it's not where I stop because I'm going through a whole lot. You know, the whole Black Revolution, the Black Panther Party, the Black Power.
Right.
So much Black people have gone. And one of the things that I want you to be careful is the Messiah in blackface.
Yes.
Okay? The lowest fruit is the what? That race thing. They use that to us now.
Yes.
They know we're gullible. African leaders are bankrupt. Period. They were miseducated. Period. They're not serving Africa. Period. But what we have to say is, what are we going to do about creating circumstances to create history makers that will not be given, you know, we're not going to give them menu. These kids are going to rise up and you will be like talking, you would think they're talking French when they're not really talking about revolution. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
No, it would not be fair for us not to acknowledge that we got a whole semester's worth of knowledge condensed in 10 minutes. Another round of applause, please. Thank you.
Nterini ngabe diza nijarabi mba feganyalo nyisa nterini ngabe diza nikanu I want to know.
Can I share something right quick? Hey, sorry. I forgot to share. I have an announcement. So as I shared, sorry, can I have everybody's attention right quick, just for a minute? So I have an event coming up about Congo. It's a poetry and arts event on Saturday, April 12th. It will take place from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Just on Georgia Avenue by Walmart. We'll have, again, raising awareness about what's going on in Congo, and just we'll have different, people, friends of Congo and advocates of Congo coming and talking about what is going on. There will be a fashion show. There will be some dance performances. There will be poetry performances and another dialogue with Congolese just about what's going on. So please, I will send information to people here so that they can distribute that. So thank you.
So why, aye. So why, so why, so why, aye. So why, so why. Debe sara la musoula, dunya musoula, kula mogelema. Ibe kono ta segena, kide molo segena, kika no la mo abada. Kataga la mola, ibo di la mola, kika no to no du abada. Sa so Johnny ni la modenye, pata bata la modenye. No one ya nema, kala monya poni nene mala mo korodo. Johnny la modenye, nene do la modenye. Mula teni ni bolo, ikana di kata la mula. Ide muzo mani bi bolo, ikana di kata la mula. Benje mani bi bolo, ikana di kata la mula. Obena ni zukasiye, obena ni sonjare. So
pressé mauvais c'est pas wasema. Jesu na pressé sando pesa mamu. Jesu na pressé